The night sky is lying to you. Not because it wants to deceive you, not because the universe is hostile, but because light is never where you think it is. Every star you have ever looked at, every quiet constellation you learned as a child, every soft glow stretching across the dark, none of it exists in the moment you believe you are seeing it. The sky above you is not happening now. It is a delay, a memory still in motion. And once you notice that, something subtle begins to feel wrong. Because we grow up believing that seeing means witnessing reality as it is. That sight equals truth. That when our eyes receive light, we are connected to the present. But the universe does not work that way. Light moves, and movement takes time. Even the closest star to us, the one that warms your skin during the day, is already outdated by the time you feel it. The sunlight touching your face left the sun more than 8 minutes ago. If the sun were to disappear right now, you would continue to live inside its illusion for 8 full minutes. Unaware that its source was gone, that realization is small, almost harmless. But it opens a door. Because once you accept that the nearest star is already part of the past, you have to confront what that means for everything else. The stars above you are not nearby. They are not recent. Some are hundreds of years old by the time their light reaches you. Some are thousands. Some are millions. And some are so distant that their light began its journey long before Earth had continents, before trees learned how to grow, before consciousness ever wondered what it meant to exist. We do not see the universe as it is. We see it as it was. This is not philosophy. This is not metaphor. This is physics. Light has a finite speed, and the universe is unimaginably large, which means the night sky is not a window. It is an archive. At first, that idea feels poetic, almost comforting, as if the universe is generously sharing its history with us. But stay with it a little longer, and the comfort begins to thin. Because history can be outdated. History can be misleading. History can show things that no longer exist. And that leads to a quiet, unsettling question. What if some of the things we are looking at are already gone? Not dimmed, not transformed, but ended, their light still traveling, still arriving, still convincing us they are alive. If that thought makes your chest feel slightly hollow, you are not imagining it. It should, because it suggests that existence itself might not be synchronized. That reality does not unfold together. That now is not a shared moment across the cosmos. And if that is true, then the sky above you is not a map of the present. It is a carefully delayed performance. A vast, ongoing replay. A universe acting out scenes that may no longer be real. Before we go any further, pause for a moment. If this kind of question stirs something in you, if you feel that quiet pull to understand what the universe is actually showing you, then take a second to support this space. Like this video, share it with someone who looks at the night sky the way you do, and subscribe to Whispers of the Universe. These stories only exist because you allow them to continue. Now, let's return to the discomfort. Because the deeper problem is not that light takes time to travel. We have known that for generations. The deeper problem is what that delay does to truth. When you look at a distant star, you assume that what you see represents something that still exists in roughly the same state. Your mind quietly fills in the gap. It assumes continuity. But the universe never promised continuity. Stars are not permanent. They are processes. They ignite, evolve, destabilize, and die. Some collapse inward and vanish quietly. Some explode violently, scattering their elements across space. Some fade so slowly that their death feels like an afterthought. And all of that can happen while their light is still on its way to you. Which means there is a disturbing possibility hidden inside every telescope image. You might be observing something that no longer exists. Not hypothetically, not metaphorically, literally. A galaxy could have torn itself apart millions of years ago, and you would still be admiring its spiral arms tonight, unaware that you are looking at a ghost. First, this feels like a technical detail, a scientific footnote, but it refuses to stay small. Because once you accept that the universe shows you its past, not its present, you are forced to confront a much larger instability. How much of what we call reality is already outdated by the time we experience it? Your eyes receive light. Your brain processes it. Your consciousness constructs meaning. All of that takes time, which means even your most immediate experience of now is already a reconstruction of something that just happened. You are never fully in the present. You are always slightly behind it. The universe is not waiting for you to catch up. And here is where the feeling of wrongness deepens. Because we do not merely observe the universe, we make decisions based on what we see. We map it. We model it. We name structures and boundaries. We draw conclusions about its shape, its age, its fate. But all of that is built on delayed information. We are like historians trying to predict the future, using documents that are still in transit. This does not mean our science is false. It means it is temporally displaced, accurate, but late. And that raises a question most people never stop to ask. If the universe is always speaking to us from the past, is it possible that we are misunderstanding what it is saying now? We tend to imagine the cosmos as something immediate and responsive, as if it exists in a shared moment with us. But what if it does not? What if the universe you see tonight is not the universe you are actually living in? What if you are surrounded by structures that have already changed, collapsed, merged, vanished, while their light continues to arrive like a polite lie, refusing to reveal the truth too soon? This is not a conspiracy of nature. It is simply how distance works. But simplicity does not make it harmless, because when distance combines with time, it fractures reality into layers. Layers of then, stacked invisibly on top of one another. A star 1 year away shows you its past from 1 year ago. A star 1,000 years away shows you a much older memory. A galaxy millions of light years distant shows you an era that predates human history. And the most distant light we can observe, the faint glow at the edge of the observable universe, shows us a time before stars even existed. All of it arriving together. All of it overlapping. All of it pretending to be now. Seg. The sky does not tell you this difference. It blends everything into a single image. Your eyes cannot separate ages. Your mind assumes unity. But the universe is not unified in time. It is fragmented, layered, out of sync. And once you realize that, you begin to suspect something unsettling. Maybe the night sky is not a live broadcast at all. Maybe it is a museum. A vast, silent exhibition of things that once were. Some exhibits still exist somewhere beyond your reach. Others are long gone, preserved only as traveling light. And you, standing beneath it all, are walking through halls of cosmic memory without ever being told. But this museum does not label its displays. It does not warn you which objects are alive and which are already dead. It simply shines. And that leads to the question that will quietly guide everything that follows. If the universe we see is made of delayed light, how much of it is still real? And how much of it is only appearing to be? As we move forward, we will begin to peel these layers apart, from the smallest delays that feel insignificant to the ancient light that has been traveling longer than Earth has existed. We will follow the glow backward through time until the idea of now starts to dissolve. And when that happens, the sky above you may never look the same again. Because once you realize you are surrounded by the past, you can no longer assume that what you see is what truly is. And that realization has consequences we almost never talk about. Not yet, but we're getting closer. The idea settles quietly after a while. Not like a shock, not like fear, more like a thin layer of unease that refuses to leave. You begin to understand that the universe does not reveal itself all at once, that what reaches your eyes has already been shaped by distance, by time, by delay. And yet, there is something even more unsettling than ancient galaxies and dying stars. Because the delay does not begin far away, it begins right here, closer than you expect, closer than your intuition is comfortable with. Before we talk about millions of years, Before we drift toward the edges of the observable universe, we need to look at a distance so small it almost feels harmless. A single year, 1 light year, because even at that scale, the present is already gone. Light travels fast, faster than anything else in the universe. Nothing outruns it, and still, it is not instant. A light year is not a measure of time. It is a measure of distance. The distance light can travel in 1 year, about 9.5 trillion kilometers. That number is difficult to feel, so the mind usually shrugs and moves on. But the implication of that distance is impossible to ignore once you pause. If a star is 1 light year away from you, the light entering your eyes tonight left that star 1 full year ago. 1 year? That may not sound like much. We think in years comfortably. We mark birthdays. We track seasons. We make plans. A year feels close, manageable. But the universe does not care how familiar the unit feels. A year ago, things were different. Your body was different. Your thoughts were different. The world had already shifted in ways you did not notice. And yet, when you look at that star, your mind quietly assumes it is still there, still burning, still unchanged. Because 1 year feels too small to matter, that assumption is the first mistake. The nearest star system to Earth, beyond our sun, is more than 4 light years away, which means the light you would see from it tonight began its journey before the most recent chapters of your life unfolded. Before conversations, you still remember clearly. Before decisions, you still feel the weight of, and already, without realizing it, you are no longer looking at the present. You are looking at a memory. This is where the feeling of wrongness begins to sharpen. Because our senses evolved to deal with immediacy, with predators that leap, with food that spoils, with changes that matter in seconds, not centuries. We are not built to feel time delays stretched across space. So the brain compensates. It smooths things over. It assumes continuity. It tells you, if I see it, it must still be happening. But that is a convenience, not a truth. Even the light from the moon, that pale, steady companion in the night sky, is delayed by more than a second. When you look at the moon, you are seeing it as it was just over a second ago. Again, this seems trivial. 1 second feels like nothing, but it establishes a pattern. There is no such thing as seeing something as it is, only as it was. The present slips away faster than perception can catch it, and the universe does not wait. At small distances, the delay is barely noticeable. At larger distances, it becomes impossible to ignore. But the mechanism is always the same. Light moves. Time passes. Reality changes while the message is still traveling, which means every observation contains a quiet assumption that nothing significant happened in the meantime. Most of the time, that assumption holds. Stars are stable for long stretches. Planets follow predictable paths. The cosmos appears calm, but calm is not permanence. Stars flare. Stars dim. Stars collapse. And none of those events announce themselves in advance. You do not get a warning label on the light. It does not say, by the time you see this, I may no longer exist. And 8. It simply arrives. Clean, convincing, complete. And that is where the illusion becomes dangerous. Because once you accept the image as real, you begin to build on it. You draw maps. You define neighborhoods of stars. You describe structures and patterns, all based on snapshots that are already outdated. Even at a distance of 1 light year, the universe has had time to change. Maybe not dramatically, maybe not in a way that matters, but the point is not how much changed. The point is that change was possible, and that possibility grows with distance. There is something quietly humbling about this. You realize that certainty fades not because of ignorance, but because of physics. No matter how precise your instruments become, no matter how carefully you measure, you can never eliminate the delay. You can only account for it. Counting for it does not restore the present. It only acknowledges its absence. This is where many people stop thinking about the problem. They accept that light takes time. They nod. They move on. But if you stay with the idea, if you let it breathe for a moment longer, it begins to bend the way you think about existence itself. Because if you are always seeing the past, then the present is something you never actually experience directly. It exists, but always just beyond reach. You live inside a stream of delayed signals, stitched together so seamlessly that your mind calls it now. And describe, that stitched-together illusion works beautifully at human scales. It keeps you alive. It lets you move through the world. But at cosmic scales, the stitching comes undone. The universe does not present itself as a single moment. It presents itself as layers of time stacked across space. And at 1 light year, the layers are thin, almost invisible. At 10 light years, they thicken. At 1,000, they become unmistakable. But they are already there, even here, even close. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If the universe does not share a single present, then what exactly are we participating in? Are we living in now? Or are we navigating a carefully assembled reconstruction? The brain prefers not to answer that. It prefers to believe that immediacy still exists somewhere, so it invents a compromise. It says, the delay is real, but it doesn't matter. Is not his. And maybe, practically, that is true. But philosophically, it matters deeply. Because it means that reality is not something you encounter head-on. It is something that arrives, filtered, delayed, already shaped by what it once was. And you do not notice this arrival because it never stops. Light is always coming, always filling the gap, always convincing you that the image is complete, but completeness is not the same as truth. It is only coherence. This is why the idea of a light year deserves more respect than it gets. It is not just a unit of distance. It is a reminder that time and space are inseparable, that you cannot look outward without looking backward, that every direction you face is also a direction into the past, and that the universe has been showing you this all along, quietly, patiently, without ever explaining what it means. As the distances increase, this problem does not fade. It intensifies. The thin delay of 1 year becomes dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. And at that point, the idea that nothing important changed becomes harder and harder to defend. Because the universe is not static, it is restless. Stars are born and die, systems drift, structures evolve, and all of it continues, while the light is still on its way. Which means that somewhere, right now, there are stars whose last moments have already passed, while their final light has not yet reached us. They are gone, but they are still visible. Not because the universe is cruel, not because it wants to mislead, but because distance demands time. And time does not ask for permission. As we move outward from 1 light year to greater distances, this quiet discrepancy grows louder. The sky becomes less a snapshot and more a layered record, a place where different eras overlap without ever acknowledging one another. And once you see that pattern beginning here, at distances so small they once felt insignificant, it becomes impossible not to wonder what happens when the scale increases beyond intuition. Because if even the nearest stars are already behind us in time, what are we really looking at? When we lift our eyes toward the deeper sky, that question does not answer itself. It waits. And the farther we look, the heavier it becomes. The farther you look, the quieter the universe becomes. Not because there is less happening, but because the signals grow older. After 1 light year, the delay still feels tolerable. After a few light years, it becomes noticeable. But when the distance stretches into thousands of light years, the nature of what you are seeing begins to change in a way the human mind was never designed to handle. Because now, you are no longer brushing against recent memory. You are staring into deep time. Most of the stars you recognize in the night sky, the ones traced into familiar shapes and passed down through stories, are not nearby at all. They belong to our galaxy. And our galaxy is vast. The Milky Way is over 100,000 light years across, which means light from one side of it takes 100,000 years to reach the other. When you look up and see a bright star shimmering calmly above you, there is a strong chance that its light began traveling before the first human ever carved symbols into stone, before agriculture, before language settled into shape, before memory became something that could be shared. And yet, the star looks steady, alive, present. This is where the illusion becomes convincing, because the universe does not look ancient, it looks immediate. The stars do not flicker with age. They do not arrive labeled with timestamps. They do not warn you that they belong to another era. They simply shine, and your mind, desperate for coherence, accepts the image without protest. But what you are actually seeing is not a moment. It is a layer, a thin slice of the past, flattened and projected into your present. And the deeper you look into the galaxy, the more layers pile up. Stars at different distances appear together in the same sky, even though they belong to wildly different times. One star may be showing you a moment from 10,000 years ago. Another, right beside it, may be revealing something from 50,000 years ago. Another, farther still, may be whispering from a time when Earth was still wrapped in ice. Your eyes do not separate these layers. They blend them. The sky looks unified, but it is anything but. This is where the idea of the universe as a record begins to take shape. Not a record in the human sense, not neat, chronological, or complete, but a scattered archive, a collection of fragments, all arriving late, all overlapping, all pretending to belong to the same moment. And here is the subtle twist that often goes unnoticed. The universe does not show you what exists. It shows you what has survived long enough to be seen. Light is selective in that way. If a star burns brightly and steadily for millions of years, its light fills space generously. It leaves a long trail of evidence behind it. But if a star lives briefly, if it flares and dies quickly, its light may barely register, which means the sky is biased. It favors the long-lived, the stable, the persistent. Entire populations of stars may have come and gone without ever leaving a trace strong enough to reach us. They existed, they mattered, but they are absent from the archive. And this should disturb you slightly, because it means the night sky is not a neutral picture. It is a curated one, not curated by intent, but by physics. Only what shines long enough, only what emits enough light, only what survives the journey through space earns a place in your awareness. Everything else disappears quietly. Even within our own galaxy, there are regions where stars are born and die, behind thick clouds of dust and gas. Their light never escapes. Their stories never arrive. They are real, but invisible, which means that even when you are looking at the Milky Way, the glowing band stretched across the sky, you are not seeing the whole thing. You are seeing a filtered version, a version shaped by survival and chance. And now the earlier assumption begins to crack further. Not only is the sky delayed, it is incomplete. What you see is not all that exists. It is all that managed to announce itself loudly enough, for long enough, across unimaginable distances. At this scale, the delay is no longer a technical detail. It becomes a defining feature of reality. Because once the light has traveled for thousands of years, the probability that nothing has changed drops dramatically. Stars shift in brightness. They swell. They destabilize. They exhaust their fuel. Some collapse into dense remnants. Some tear themselves apart in violent flashes. Some quietly fade into obscurity. And all of this can happen while their light continues moving outward, carrying an image that no longer matches the source. So, when you look at a star thousands of light years away, you are not just seeing the past. You are seeing a possibility, a version of reality that may no longer exist anywhere. Star may still be there, or it may not. There is no way to know in real time. You are always late. This realization produces a strange emotional shift. At first, it feels unsettling, like the ground is no longer solid beneath your understanding. But then, something else emerges, a quiet humility. You begin to sense that certainty was never promised. that the universe never offered to be fully known in the present tense. It offered signals, clues, echoes, and asked you to do the best you could with them. The Milky Way, in this sense, is not a structure you observe. It is a history you intercept. Every photon that reaches your eyes has survived collisions, absorption, scattering, and time itself. Each one is a messenger that could have been lost, which means the sky is not just full of light, it is full of survivors. And survival does not imply accuracy. It implies endurance. This is where the metaphor of the archive deepens. Archives do not show everything. They show what remains. They are shaped by decay, by preservation, by chance. They feel authoritative, but they are always partial. And the universe is no different. When you map the stars of the galaxy, you are not mapping the present configuration of matter. You are reconstructing a mosaic from pieces that arrived late, unevenly, and incomplete. Yet, the reconstruction is convincing enough that you rarely question it. You trust the image because it is consistent, but consistency is not truth. It is only coherence across delay. And here, another subtle twist appears. Because if the universe is showing you a layered archive, then movement becomes harder to detect. Change becomes diluted. Events that unfold over thousands of years blend smoothly into the background. Violence looks calm. Instability looks permanent. The galaxy appears serene, not because it is, but because you are seeing it through time-averaged light. This is why catastrophic events in space feel rare. They are not. They are simply brief. And brief things struggle to leave a long trail of light, which means that much of the universe's turbulence never reaches you. What reaches you instead is a softened version, a universe smoothed by distance, a universe that feels older, quieter, more stable than it truly is. And now, without realizing it, you have crossed an important threshold. You are no longer just dealing with delay. You are dealing with selection. What you see is not only late, it is chosen by the physics of light itself. And that means that as the distances grow even larger, as we move beyond the galaxy, the archive becomes even more distorted, even more incomplete, even more deceptive in its calmness. Because outside the Milky Way, the scale of time stretches beyond anything your intuition can anchor. And once we step there, the question is no longer whether the past is visible. The question becomes, how much of what you see has already vanished? That question waits patiently in the darkness between galaxies, and we are about to drift straight toward it. Beyond the boundaries of our galaxy, the silence deepens, not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of distance stretched too far for urgency to survive. When you leave the Milky Way behind, you leave a structure you still vaguely understand, a disk of stars, a shared gravitational home. Outside of it, the universe stops feeling like a place and starts feeling like a separation. The nearest large galaxies are millions of light years away. Millions. That word carries weight now, because by this point, you are no longer dealing with delays that feel abstract. You are looking across spans of time, long enough for civilizations to rise and disappear. When light from a nearby galaxy reaches your eyes, it does not carry a recent memory. It carries an era. A spiral galaxy glowing softly in your telescope tonight may be showing you a moment from 2 million years ago. At that time, early humans were only beginning to walk upright. Language had not formed. Memory had not yet learned how to preserve itself. And yet, the galaxy looks whole, balanced, alive. This is where the illusion becomes almost irresistible. Because galaxies appear stable, their shapes are graceful, their arms curve smoothly, their centers glow with quiet authority. They look like structures that endure. But endurance is misleading. Galaxies are not frozen monuments. They are dynamic systems. They collide. They tear stars from one another. They warp, stretch, and reshape themselves over time. But when these events unfold over millions of years, and their light takes millions of years to arrive, motion disappears. Change becomes invisible. Violence looks like stillness. You are not seeing a galaxy as it moves. You are seeing it as it averages, a long exposure across time. Which means that when you look at a distant galaxy, you are not witnessing a moment. You are witnessing a compressed history, flattened into a single image. And that compression hides a dangerous assumption, the assumption that what you see still exists in roughly the same form, but at this scale, that assumption becomes fragile. A galaxy can undergo dramatic transformation. In a few 100,000 years, star formation can shut down, gas can be stripped away, entire regions can go dark, two galaxies can begin a slow collision, a gravitational dance that takes hundreds of millions of years, while their combined light still travels outward, showing you a pristine, untouched pair. From your perspective, they are calm. From theirs, they are already changing. This is where the idea of the sky as a record sharpens into something colder. Because records can lie without ever intending to. They lie by omission, by delay, by freezing motion into appearance, and the universe does this everywhere beyond the galaxy. When astronomers catalog distant galaxies, they describe types: elliptical, spiral, irregular. These categories feel authoritative, definitive, but they are snapshots, labels applied to things that may no longer fit them. A spiral galaxy you admire tonight may already be losing its arms. An elliptical one may be quietly accreting new material. An irregular one may be in the middle of a transformation you will never see complete. Because by the time the next update arrives, millions of years will have passed. And here, another unsettling realization emerges. The farther you look, the more likely it is that the thing you are observing has already crossed a threshold you cannot detect. At close distances, change is unlikely within the delay window. At galactic distances, change becomes probable. At intergalactic distances, it becomes almost expected, which means that when you look deep into space, you are not asking, "Has this changed?" It's leave-route. You are asking, "How much has changed? Since this light left?" It's down, and there is no answer waiting for you, only probability. This transforms the act of observation itself. You are no longer a witness. You are an interpreter. You infer present reality. From ancient signals, you extrapolate forward. From images that are already outdated, and you do this knowing, at least subconsciously, that the margin of error grows with every light year. Yet the universe offers no alternative. There is no faster messenger, no way to peek ahead. Light is the limit, and the limit is absolute. This is why the space between galaxies feels so heavy. It is not empty. It is filled with time, time that light must cross, time during which everything you are looking at continues to evolve without you, which means the universe does not reveal itself to you as a synchronized whole. It reveals itself as a collection of echoes, each arriving from a different moment, each pretending to belong to the same present. Your mind does the rest. It stitches the echoes together. It smooths the gaps. It builds a coherent picture, and that picture feels convincing enough that you forget how it was assembled. But coherence is not simultaneity. The universe does not exist in a single frame. It exists as a cascade of moments, forever out of step with one another. And the farther outward you drift, the more pronounced that misalignment becomes. At some point, you are no longer looking at structures that resemble the modern universe at all. You are looking at earlier versions, simpler ones, hotter, denser, galaxies that are still forming, stars that burn differently, physics itself behaving in unfamiliar ways. But even here, the illusion persists. The light arrives calmly, silently, as if nothing is urgent, as if nothing is changing faster than you can know. And that calmness is the most deceptive part of all. As it trains you to trust the image, it encourages you to believe that the universe is showing you itself honestly. But honesty requires timeliness, and the universe has never offered that. Only persistence, only distance, only light that keeps moving long after its source has changed. As we continue outward, the archive grows older. The layers thicken, the gap between appearance and reality widens, and soon we will reach a point where the question is no longer whether what you see still exists, but whether the version of the universe you are seeing has any counterpart left at all. That is where the past stops feeling familiar, and where the idea of a living cosmos begins to dissolve into something far stranger. That boundary is closer than you think, and the light that marks it has been traveling toward you for almost the entire history of everything you know. There is a point where distance stops feeling large and starts feeling absolute. It is not marked by a wall, not announced by a boundary. There is no visible edge in the sky that says, beyond this, you are no longer looking at the same universe. This promise, and yet, such a point exists, because there is a limit to how far light can travel. In the age of the universe, not because space ends, but because time does. This is where the idea of 13 billion years enters the story, not as a number, but as a horizon. The farthest light you can possibly observe left its source nearly 13 billion years ago. That light began moving when the universe was young, so young that stars had barely begun to form, so young that galaxies were still assembling themselves from raw chaos. And now, after crossing unimaginable distances, it arrives, quietly, inside your instruments. This light does not come from a place. It comes from a time when you look at the deepest images of space. You are not looking outward. You are looking backward, almost to the beginning of everything. This is where the phrase, the observable universe, takes on its true meaning. It does not mean the whole universe. It means the portion of the universe that has had enough time to send light to you. Everything beyond that boundary may exist, or may not, but either way, it is unreachable not by distance, but by causality. No signal from beyond that horizon has ever reached us, and no signal from us will ever reach it. Not because we lack technology, but because time itself stands in the way. This is the first moment where the illusion of completeness truly collapses. Up to this point, you could still imagine that what you see is merely delayed, that with enough patience, the present might eventually arrive. But here, patience fails, because the universe has a finite age, and light can only travel so far in a finite amount of time, which means that what you are seeing is not just old, it is the oldest possible image. Beyond it, there is nothing you can ever see, not darkness, not emptiness, just silence enforced by physics. This boundary is not an edge in space, it is an edge in time, a surface made entirely of ancient light. And here, the earlier questions begin to transform. It is no longer about whether a star has changed. While its light was traveling, it is no longer about whether a galaxy still exists. Now the question becomes more unsettling. What if the universe you are seeing is not only delayed, but fundamentally incomplete? Because everything beyond this horizon is missing from your reality forever. You can never know what lies there. Not now, not later, not ever. And this is where the idea of the sky as a museum becomes something deeper. Museums are curated spaces. They show you what has survived, what was preserved, what could be carried forward. They do not show you everything that ever existed. The observable universe works the same way. What you see is not all that is. It is all that has managed to leave a trace that could reach you. And at this distance, 13 billion years, that trace is incredibly fragile. The light you are receiving is faint, stretched, redshifted. It has been pulled apart by the expansion of space itself. Each photon has lost energy along the way, not because it weakened, but because the universe grew around it. Space expanded, the wavelength stretched, the message blurred. By the time it arrives, it barely whispers. Yet, this whisper is treated as the most authoritative evidence we have about the early universe. This is the irony. The oldest light we can see is also the most distorted. It carries information, but that information has been reshaped. by everything it passed through: time, expansion, intervening matter. It is a message that survived, but not intact. And still, we build entire theories on what it tells us. We reconstruct the birth of galaxies. We infer the first stars. We estimate the age of the cosmos itself, all from light that has been traveling since almost the beginning of time. Light that has no memory of what happened after it left. Light that cannot update itself. This is where the notion of truth becomes delicate, because at this scale, truth is not something you observe directly. It is something you infer. And inference always carries uncertainty. You are not witnessing the universe as it is. You are decoding a fossil, a relic, frozen into motion. And like all fossils, it tells a story, but not the whole one. This is where a subtle but profound twist emerges. Up to now, it was tempting to believe that the universe is still out there, fully formed, waiting to be discovered in real time. But the existence of an observational horizon breaks that illusion. There are parts of the universe that are not just unknown to you. They are unknowable. They will never be seen, never be measured, never be included in your picture of reality. Not because they are hidden, but because they are causally disconnected. They exist, perhaps, in a different temporal conversation, one that you are not part of, which means that your reality, everything you can ever observe, is a subset, a fragment, a partial narrative. And that realization quietly changes what it means to say that something is real. They, I too, or find a sextiler, time in one. Is reality defined by existence or by observability? If something exists beyond the horizon but can never affect you, never be seen, never leave a trace in your experience, in what sense is it part of your universe? Physics struggles with this question. Philosophy wrestles with it. But the night sky does not answer it. It simply glows, and the glow stops, exactly where time runs out. This is where the feeling of deception sharpens again, but not in the way you might expect. The universe is not lying to you. It is showing you everything it can, and that is precisely the problem, because what it can show you is not enough to reconstruct the whole. You are seeing a universe with its edges cut off by time, a universe missing unknown amounts of itself, a universe where the most distant light does not represent far away, so much as long ago, it not were. And beyond that long ago, there is no visual access at all. This forces a difficult admission. The universe you experience is not the universe as it exists. It is the universe as it is permitted to appear to you, filtered by distance, filtered by time, filtered by the speed of light. And this filtering does not stop at the horizon. It shapes everything you see within it. Because once you realize that the deepest sky is capped by an ancient boundary, you begin to suspect that the same principle applies closer in, that even the stars and galaxies you feel familiar with are part of a system that never reveals itself completely. You are always seeing what survived the journey, always interpreting what arrived, always mistaking arrival for presence. This is the quiet cost of living in a universe where information takes time to travel. You do not inhabit a shared moment with the cosmos. You inhabit a collection of delays. And the farther you look, the older those delays become, until eventually you reach a surface where time itself refuses to go further, not because the universe ends, but because your access does. This is the oldest light you will ever see, and yet it is not the beginning. It is simply the earliest memory that could reach you, which means that even the deepest sky is already incomplete, already missing chapters, already hiding things you will never know existed. And if that is true at the largest scale possible, then a more unsettling thought begins to form. The universe cannot show you its beginning in full. If it cannot show you its edges, if it cannot show you its present in real time, then perhaps the greatest illusion is not that the sky is old. It is that it feels whole, because wholeness requires simultaneity. And simultaneity does not exist on a cosmic scale. As we move forward from here, we will begin to ask a different kind of question. Not how old the light is, but what it means to live inside a reality that is permanently out of sync with itself. A reality where the present is never fully visible. A reality where existence arrives late. That question does not belong to the edge of the universe. It belongs much closer, and it is about to turn inward. Somewhere in the universe, right now, a star has already died. Not in a dramatic way that announces itself across the sky. Not with a warning. Not with a signal meant for you. It simply ended. Its nuclear fire collapsed. Its balance failed. Its core changed state. And yet, you may still be looking directly at it. Because death in the universe does not arrive all at once. It arrives in layers. The star disappears first. The light follows later. This is where the idea of a dead galaxy becomes unsettling, not as a metaphor, but as a physical possibility. When we say a galaxy is alive, what do we mean? We do not mean that it thinks. We do not mean that it breathes. We mean that stars are forming within it. That gas is collapsing. That energy is still being released. A living galaxy glows with activity. A dead galaxy does not. It has exhausted its fuel. Star formation has slowed or stopped. The bright blue stars are gone, leaving only older, dimmer remnants. From the inside, this transition is gradual. From the outside, it can look complete. But here is the part that rarely settles comfortably in the mind. A galaxy can be dead and still appear fully alive, because the light showing you its vitality may have left millions of years ago. The image arrives intact, convincing, detailed, and nothing in that image tells you that the process has already ended. This is not speculation, this is expectation. At the distances we are now discussing, the chance that nothing has changed since the light began its journey is no longer small, it is vanishing. Galaxies evolve on timescales that overlap directly, with the delays imposed by distance. Star formation can shut down in a few 100 million years. Gas can be stripped away through interactions. Internal dynamics can shift dramatically. And when you are observing a galaxy 10, 20, or 50 million light years away, you are peering across exactly that window, which means that many of the galaxies you admire are not current snapshots. They are historical documents. Some are outdated by a small margin, some by an enormous one, and some no longer resemble the images you see at all. This is where the metaphor of performance becomes unavoidable. The light is still doing its job, still traveling, still delivering an image. Even though the original event has passed, the galaxy has exited the stage, but the spotlight remains on. From your perspective, the show is still running. This introduces a quiet but profound discomfort, because we tend to associate visibility with existence. If we can see it, we assume it is there. But the universe breaks that contract. Visibility only means that light was once emitted, not that the source still exists in the same state, which means that there are likely galaxies in your night sky that are no longer forming stars, no longer evolving the way they appear, no longer alive in any meaningful astrophysical sense. And yet, they shine. They shine because light is loyal to the past. It does not care what happens next. This is where the idea of living in a museum of light stops being poetic and starts becoming literal. Museums display things that once had function, once had motion, once had context. But inside the museum, they are frozen. The universe does something similar, except the freezing happens through time delay, not intention. When you look at a distant galaxy, you are looking at an exhibit. You are seeing it as it once was, preserved by traveling photons. Some exhibits represent objects that still exist. Others represent objects that are gone, but the lighting is the same. Nothing tells you which is which. This is where trust becomes dangerous, because the sky trains you to trust appearances. It offers coherence, patterns, stability. It encourages you to believe that what you see is representative of what is. But at cosmic distances, appearance and reality drift apart, and that drift is not symmetrical. You cannot see change as it happens. You can only see it once it is over, and even then, only after a long delay, which means death in the universe is often invisible. Stars explode, but their explosions arrive late. Galaxies shut down, but their images persist. Entire regions can go dark, but their last light continues outward, convincing distant observers that everything is fine. This creates a strange inversion. The more distant an object is, the less reliable its appearance becomes. Brightness no longer guarantees activity. Structure no longer guarantees stability. At large distances, everything you see carries an implicit question. Is this still true? And there is no immediate answer. We sometimes speak of ghost galaxies in a casual way to describe faint, diffuse structures. But the deeper ghost is temporal. A galaxy can be a ghost, not because it is faint, but because it is no longer there in the way it appears. Its light has outlived its relevance. This does not mean that the universe is deceiving you. There is no intention here. But it does mean that the universe is indifferent to your need for timely truth. Light obeys physics, not meaning. Once emitted, it continues, no matter what follows. This is why the concept of now becomes so fragile. As you move outward, for nearby objects, the delay is small enough that the difference between appearance and reality feels negligible. For distant galaxies, that difference becomes enormous. The idea of a shared present collapses. There is no moment when the galaxy you see and the observer seeing it occupy the same temporal state. They are forever misaligned. And yet, observation continues. We build catalogs, we classify galaxies, we describe their properties, we speak with confidence about their shapes, their colors, their behaviors. But underlying all of that is an unspoken assumption that the delay does not fundamentally change the meaning of what we see. At small scales, that assumption holds. At large scales, it becomes questionable, because meaning depends on context, and context is time-sensitive. A galaxy that is actively forming stars means something very different from one that is already shut down. A spiral structure in motion is not the same as a spiral fossil, but from your vantage point, both look identical. This is where the twist deepens, because if many galaxies you see are already dead or transformed, then the universe you are observing is not just delayed, it is posthumous. You are not witnessing events as they unfold. You are witnessing their echoes, and echoes are always quieter than the original sound. They smooth sharp edges, they blur violence, they hide endings, which means that the universe you see may appear calmer, more orderly, more stable than the universe that actually exists. Violence fades with distance. Chaos averages out. The farther away you look, the more serene everything seems. Not because serenity dominates, but because turbulence does not survive the journey as well. This creates a profound distortion. The universe looks older, quieter, more resolved than it truly is. And this distortion shapes your understanding. It influences how you imagine cosmic history, how you think about beginnings and endings. It encourages you to believe that the universe unfolds slowly and gently. But that belief may be an artifact of delay, because rapid events leave thin traces, long-lived states leave thick ones, and thickness dominates the image, which means that the sky is not an unbiased witness. It favors what lingers, and death, especially sudden death, often does not linger. This realization leads to an uncomfortable implication. If many of the galaxies you see are already past their most active phase, if some are already dead, if some have changed beyond recognition, then the universe you know is already outdated. Not slightly, profoundly. You are building an understanding of reality based on what remains visible, not on what is currently happening. This understanding feels solid only because it is consistent, but consistency does not guarantee relevance. It only guarantees internal agreement. The past agrees with itself very well. The present is messier, and the universe offers you the past far more generously than the present, which raises a difficult thought. What if the true state of the universe, right now, is far more chaotic, more violent, more unstable than anything you can see? What if what you perceive as calm is simply the residue of survival? The light that reaches you has already passed every test. It avoided absorption. It avoided scattering. It avoided annihilation. It is, by definition, the light that made it, which means the sky is composed of winners. The failures are invisible, and invisibility does not mean insignificance. It means silence. As we continue forward, this silence becomes louder, because beyond dead galaxies, beyond the Museum of Light, we begin to encounter something even stranger. Not just objects that no longer exist, but signals that never could. Entire regions of reality that have no light to show you. No matter how long you wait, no matter how carefully you look, the universe is not only hiding its present, it is hiding entire possibilities. And that realization forces a shift. The problem is no longer about delay alone. It becomes about access, about what can be known, and what is permanently out of reach. That shift is coming. And once it arrives, the question will no longer be whether the universe is lying to you. It will be whether you were ever meant to see it whole at all. At some point, the word distance stops describing space and starts describing separation. Not just how far something is, but how unreachable it has become. Because beyond dead galaxies, beyond images that no longer correspond to what exists, there is a deeper silence waiting. A silence not caused by absence, but by limitation. There are places in the universe where light has never reached you, not because it was blocked, not because it was weak, but because there has not been enough time. These regions are not dark in the ordinary sense. They are not empty. They are simply unconnected to you. This is where the idea of access replaces the idea of delay. Up to now, everything you have considered was delayed information, late but eventually arriving. Here, that promise breaks, because the universe is expanding, not slowly, not gently, relentlessly. Space itself stretches, carrying galaxies away from one another, and beyond a certain distance, that stretching happens faster than light can compensate for. The result is subtle but absolute. There are regions of the universe that are receding from you, faster than their light can ever arrive. Their signals are not delayed, they are lost. Not destroyed, not erased, just forever unable to reach you. This creates a boundary that feels different from everything before it. It is not a wall, it is not an edge. It is a causal horizon, a limit imposed not by space, but by time and expansion combined. And once you realize this boundary exists, the shape of reality changes. Because now, the universe is no longer merely incomplete, it is partitioned. There are events happening right now that you will never know occurred, not because you lack curiosity, not because your instruments are insufficient, but because the universe itself has placed them outside your causal reach. They do not belong to your timeline. They do not belong to your experience. They are not part of your story. And yet, they exist. This is where the feeling of living inside a museum becomes more precise. Museums do not just preserve the past. They define what is included. Everything else is excluded not necessarily because it lacks importance, but because it cannot be brought inside. The observable universe works the same way. What you call the universe is not the totality of existence. It is the totality of existence that can still communicate with you. Everything else is outside the exhibit, not gone, just inaccessible. This introduces a quiet but radical shift in perspective. Reality is no longer defined by what exists. It is defined by what can interact. Something can never affect you, never send a signal, never exchange information. Then, for all practical purposes, it might as well not exist. Not philosophically, physically, because physics is built on interaction. Causality is its foundation, and beyond the horizon, causality breaks. This is not because the laws of physics fail, They work perfectly. They simply work in a way that does not include you. This forces an uncomfortable redefinition. The universe you live in is not the universe in its entirety. It is the universe that overlaps with your light cone, your past light cone, your future light cone. Everything else is disconnected. This does not make those regions unreal, but it does make them irrelevant to your experience. And irrelevance, at a cosmic scale, is indistinguishable from absence. This is where the illusion of centrality dissolves completely. You are not at the center of the universe, not even conceptually. You are inside a bubble of accessibility, surrounded by vast regions that will never acknowledge your existence. No signal you send will ever reach them. No message they send will ever arrive. The separation is permanent, and this permanence changes how you should think about what you see. Because if some parts of the universe are forever beyond contact, then what you see is not just delayed or incomplete. It is selectively connected. The sky is not a global picture. It is a local one, local not in space, but in causality. You are seeing the portion of existence that has not yet slipped away from you, which means the sky is shrinking, even as it appears vast. Every moment, the expansion of space pushes more regions beyond your horizon. They do not disappear visually all at once. They fade. Their light stretches, redshifts, weakens, until eventually it falls below detectability. And when that happens, those regions are gone from your universe, not destroyed, just unreachable. This introduces a strange asymmetry. The past is generous. It keeps sending you information. The future is restrictive. It closes doors permanently, which means the universe you observe is biased toward what has already happened, toward what has already had time to send light, toward what has not yet crossed the boundary of no return. This is why the deepest sky is filled with ancient objects and nearly empty of truly recent ones. Not because the universe was more active in the past, but because the past has had time to announce itself. The present is still trying, and parts of it never will. This brings us to a difficult realization. When you look at the night sky, you are not seeing what exists now. You are seeing what still has a connection to you. Existence without connection is invisible, and invisibility, in a physical sense, is equivalent to non-existence. This does not mean the universe is small. It means your access to it is, and that access is shrinking, slowly, relentlessly. As space expands, fewer regions remain causally connected. More of the universe slips beyond the horizon. Not violently, not suddenly, quietly. This quiet loss rarely registers emotionally, because the sky still looks full, still rich, still infinite. But that fullness is deceptive. It is a snapshot of a shrinking domain, a record of what you used to be connected to. And now, something subtle but profound shifts. Up to this point, you might have believed that if you waited long enough, you would eventually see everything, that the universe would reveal itself in time. But now, waiting no longer helps. Time is the very thing that removes access. The longer you wait, the more is lost. This is the opposite of intuition. We associate time with accumulation, with knowledge, with progress. But on a cosmic scale, time is also subtraction. It closes horizons. It erases potential interactions. It turns possible knowledge into permanent silence. And this silence does not announce itself. There is no moment. When the universe says, "You can no longer see this," Nate is due down. The light simply stops arriving, and you assume nothing was there. This is the most deceptive aspect of all, because the universe does not tell you what you are missing. It only shows you what remains. And what remains feels complete, because you have nothing to compare it to. This is why the idea of a cosmic museum is not just a metaphor. Museums do not show you what is missing. They show you what survived. And survival, again, is not the same as representativeness. It is not a fair sample. It is a biased one. which means that the universe you reconstruct, the one you describe, model, and understand, is shaped as much by loss as by presence. And loss leaves no trace. This leads to an unsettling thought. If large portions of reality are forever inaccessible, then any claim about the universe as a whole is necessarily incomplete. Not wrong, incomplete. And incompleteness matters because it means that certainty is always provisional. That knowledge is always local. That the universe may be radically different beyond the horizon, and you will never know. This is not a failure of science. It is a condition of existence. Physics does not promise omniscience. It promises consistency within limits. And those limits are written into space-time itself. As we move forward from here, the focus shifts again. Not outward, inward. Because once you accept that the universe hides vast regions from you, not temporarily, but permanently, you begin to wonder something unsettling. If the cosmos can withhold so much at large scales, what might it be withholding? Even closer to home? Not beyond galaxies, not beyond horizons, but right here, within the act of observation itself. Because the next boundary is not about distance. It is about perception, and that boundary is far more intimate than any edge of the universe. There is a moment when understanding stops feeling empowering and starts feeling unsettling, not because the ideas are too complex, but because they begin to touch something intimate. Up to now, the distance protected you. Galaxies were far away. Horizons were abstract. The consequences felt cosmic, not personal. But here, the problem moves closer. Closer than stars, closer than light years, closer than the sky. It moves into the act of seeing itself. Because once you accept that the universe never shows you its present, you are forced to confront a quieter, more uncomfortable question. What if the feeling that something is off is not about the universe at all, but about the way perception works? This feeling is subtle. It does not arrive as fear. It arrives as a faint mismatch, a sense that what you are experiencing and what is actually happening are not perfectly aligned. Most of the time, you ignore this. Your senses are good enough. Your world feels stable. Your actions have predictable outcomes. But that stability depends on a fragile assumption that perception and reality overlap closely enough to be treated as the same thing. At human scales, this assumption holds. At cosmic scales, it collapses. And once it collapses there, you begin to wonder where else it might fail. Because the delay is not just in the universe, it is inside you. When light enters your eyes, it does not become experience immediately. It must be absorbed by cells, converted into signals, processed by layers of neural machinery. This takes time. Not much, but not zero. Milliseconds pass, then more. By the time you become aware of what you see, the event that produced that light is already gone. You do not experience reality directly. You experience a reconstruction. This is not a flaw. It is how perception works. But once you recognize it, the certainty you once felt begins to loosen. Because now the delay is not millions of years. It is happening constantly. Every sight, every sound, every sensation, all of it arrives late. Your brain hides this delay brilliantly. It stitches signals together. It predicts outcomes. It fills gaps. It creates the feeling of a continuous present. But that feeling is an illusion. A necessary one, but an illusion nonetheless. And here is where the discomfort sharpens. Because if perception is always late, then the now you experience never quite exists. It has already slipped into the past. By the time you notice it, this is easy to dismiss. After all, milliseconds do not matter until you remember what you have already learned. At cosmic scales, small delays compound into vast misalignments. At perceptual scales, they compound into assumptions. You assume that what you see is what is happening. Assume that presence equals existence. You assume that clarity equals truth. But these assumptions were built for survival, not for cosmic accuracy. The universe does not honor them. And this is where the feeling of wrongness becomes personal. Because the same mechanism that hides the delay in your perception is the mechanism that allows the universe to feel coherent at all. Your brain evolved to trust images. If it did not, you would hesitate constantly. You would be paralyzed by uncertainty. So it commits to a narrative. It tells you, this is happening now, once to purus minus, even when it isn't. At small scales, the error is negligible. At large scales, it becomes existential. This is why the sky feels trustworthy. It triggers the same perceptual shortcuts as the ground beneath your feet. Your mind does not treat the stars as ancient messages. It treats them as present objects. This is not stupidity. It is efficiency. But efficiency has a cost. And that cost is epistemic drift, the gradual separation between what feels true and what actually is. This is where many people feel a quiet unease. Without knowing why, they learn that stars are far away, that light takes time, that the universe is old. And intellectually, they accept it. But emotionally, something resists. Because the experience of looking at the sky does not change. The stars still feel immediate, still feel alive, still feel present. That mismatch between knowledge and experience creates tension, and tension seeks resolution. Most people resolve it by ignoring one side. They keep the knowledge abstract and let the experience dominate. They say, yes, I know the light is old, but it doesn't really matter, which was stoics. And for daily life, that is true. But for understanding reality, it matters deeply. Because what you are actually doing when you look at the sky is participating in a cognitive compromise. You are allowing your brain to treat delayed information as if it were immediate. You are consenting to a useful fiction, and that fiction becomes dangerous only when you forget it is one. This is why the idea of a museum of light is not just about the universe. It is about consciousness. Museums rely on framing. They present artifacts in a way that feels current, relevant, alive. But the artifacts themselves belong to another time. The danger is not in the museum. It is in forgetting where you are. The universe does the same thing to you. It presents ancient light inside the frame of the present, and your perception accepts it without question. This acceptance is automatic. You do not choose it, which means you must actively unlearn it if you want to see clearly. But clarity has consequences, because once you recognize that perception is always reconstructive, you begin to wonder how deep the reconstruction goes. Is it just sensory, or does it extend to meaning? When you see a galaxy, you do not just see light. You see structure, stability, order. You interpret shape as persistence, brightness as activity, pattern as intention. But these interpretations are layered on top of delayed signals. They are guesses, informed guesses, but guesses nonetheless. And this is where the illusion thickens, because the universe encourages you to mistake coherence for simultaneity. It gives you an image that looks unified. Different distances, different eras, all blended into one sky. Your perception smooths the transitions. It creates continuity where none exists. This is not a failure of intelligence. It is the cost of having a mind that must operate in real time inside a universe that does not. The result is a persistent cognitive distortion. You feel like you are standing in the present, looking outward. But in truth, you are standing in the present, while surrounded by layered pasts, and your perception does not distinguish between them. This is why the sky can feel eternal, because time has already been averaged out. Change has already been softened. Violence has already been diluted. The universe you see is not the universe in motion. It is the universe in memory. And memory, by nature, feels stable. This brings us to a quiet but powerful twist. What if the calmness you associate with the cosmos is not a property of the cosmos itself? What if it is an artifact of delayed perception? If the universe is far more restless, more unstable, more transitional than anything you can see? Your perception cannot show you that restlessness directly. Rapid change does not survive the journey well. Brief events leave faint traces. Long-lived states dominate the image, which means that your experience of the universe is biased toward persistence. You are seeing what lasts, not what happens. And this bias extends inward. Your sense of self, your feeling of continuity, is built the same way. Neural processes average experience over time. They smooth transitions. They create a stable identity out of constant change. You feel like the same person from moment to moment because your perception hides the micro instabilities. But at smaller scales, everything is fluctuating. Everything is unstable. This parallel is not accidental. The same physics that delays light also governs neural signaling. The same time constraints apply, which means that the universe outside you and the universe inside you are aligned in a strange way. Both are always slightly late. Both present a coherent story, only by ignoring the gaps. And once you see this, the discomfort deepens, because now the problem is no longer that the universe might be misleading you. The problem is that you are built to be misled, not intentionally, not maliciously, but functionally. You are optimized for survival, not for cosmic accuracy. And the universe does not adjust itself to compensate, it simply exists. This realization can feel destabilizing. If perception is always a step behind, if the sky is always showing you ghosts, if reality is always arriving late, then what does it mean to claim that something is real? Is reality what exists, or what is experienced? If something exists but can never be perceived in time, does it belong to your world? These questions do not demand answers yet. They are meant to sit with you, because the next step in this journey is not about space or time. It is about trust. Trust in observation, trust in models, trust in the idea that understanding is even possible. And to reach that step, you must first accept something uncomfortable. The feeling that something is wrong is not a mistake. It is a signal, a quiet recognition that perception and reality are not the same thing. That recognition is rare because it offers no immediate reward. It only offers humility. And humility is not easy to sustain. In a universe that looks so certain, as we move forward, we will begin to ask, what happens when this gap between perception and reality becomes impossible to ignore? Not at the edges of the universe, not in ancient light, but in the very frameworks we use to describe existence itself. Because once perception is no longer trusted blindly, even the idea of a stable universe begins to loosen. And when that happens, the question is no longer, what are we seeing? Itself. It becomes, what are we assuming? End quote. That question is closer than you think, and it will quietly reshape everything that follows. Light does not arrive empty. It never has. When a photon reaches your eye, it is not just brightness. It is not just color. It is information encoded into its wavelength, its direction, its polarization, its intensity. Every ray of light is a message, not written in words, but in physics. And for a long time, this idea felt reassuring because information suggests truth. It suggests reliability. It suggests that if we learn how to decode the signal correctly, we can reconstruct reality as it is. This belief sits quietly at the foundation of modern astronomy. We trust light. We treat it as a faithful messenger. But the farther we've traveled in this journey, the more fragile that trust has begun to feel. Because a message can be accurate and still be misleading. Not because it is false, but because it is incomplete. Light carries information, yes, but it does not carry context. It does not carry updates. It does not carry revision. Once emitted, its story is fixed. No matter what happens afterward, this is the moment where the earlier ideas, delay, distance, death, horizons, perception, collapse into a single, unsettling realization. Light does not tell you what is. It tells you what was able to speak, and those are not the same thing. At first glance, light feels objective, impersonal, reliable. After all, photons do not lie. They do not exaggerate. They do not forget. But truth is not just accuracy. Truth depends on relevance, and relevance depends on timing. A perfectly accurate message from the wrong moment can still lead you astray. This is where the concept of light as truth begins to unravel. Imagine reading a letter that describes a city in perfect detail, its streets, its buildings, its rhythms. The letter is honest, precise, carefully written. But it was sent 100 years ago. Since then, the city has burned, rebuilt, expanded, collapsed, and transformed. Is the letter false? No. Is it useful for understanding the city now? Only partially. Light works the same way. It is always honest, but it is never current, which means that the deeper you look into space, the more you rely on historical truth, and historical truth is dangerous. When mistaken for present reality, this is where a subtle shift occurs in how science actually operates, even if we rarely acknowledge it openly. Astronomy is not the study of what exists. It is the study of what has left a detectable trace, and traces are selective. Some events leave powerful signals. Others leave almost none. A star that burns steadily for billions of years fills space with light. A brief, violent event, a rapid collapse, a short-lived flare, may leave only a faint whisper, which means the universe is not only delayed, it is biased. It amplifies what lasts and suppresses what changes quickly. This bias is not philosophical. It is physical. Light favors duration, and duration favors stability, which means that the image of the universe you construct from light will always skew toward the long-lived, the slow, the persistent. Sudden change struggles to be seen, and this is where the twist deepens. Because if light favors persistence, then the universe you see is not just incomplete, it is systematically distorted. Not distorted in shape, but in character. It looks calmer than it is, older than it is, more resolved than it is. Violence is averaged out. Instability is smoothed over. Transition is hidden. What remains visible is what endured. And endurance feels like truth. But endurance is not the same as importance. Some of the most consequential events in the universe are brief. Star formation ignites rapidly. Black holes merge in moments. Galactic collisions unleash chaos over relatively short spans. But these moments are hard to catch. Their light may be rare, their signals fleeting, their visibility dependent on alignment and chance, which means that much of what matters is underrepresented in the sky, and what is overrepresented is what stayed the same long enough to be noticed. This leads to a profound misinterpretation. We imagine the universe as slow, grand, and stately, but that may be an artifact of how information reaches us. We see what survived, not what struggled. We see the outcome, not the process. And light encourages this misunderstanding by its very nature. Because light does not show you motion directly, it shows you snapshots. And when snapshots are stretched across millions of years, motion disappears. Change becomes invisible. A galaxy that violently restructured itself over 100,000 years will still look calm. When observed from millions of light years away, the violence is real, but it is compressed into stillness. This is why distant galaxies look serene, not because serenity dominates, but because disturbance does not translate well across cosmic time delays, which means that light, despite carrying enormous amounts of information, also hides something crucial. Tempo. It tells you what happened, but not how fast. And speed matters. Speed determines whether something is stable or fragile, whether it is enduring or transient, whether it is safe to extrapolate forward. Without tempo, you are missing a dimension of truth. This missing dimension becomes critical. When you attempt to understand the universe as a system, you build models, You simulate evolution. You infer behavior. But those inferences depend on assumptions about rates, about continuity, about how quickly things change. Light does not give you those answers cleanly. It gives you integrated outcomes, which means you are always reverse engineering, from results to causes. Reverse engineering without timestamps is inherently uncertain. This is why astronomy is filled with probabilities. Likely, consistent with, within error margins. Not because the data is poor, but because the messenger is late and selectively filtered. This is where the idea of light as a narrator becomes dangerous. Narrators choose what to include. Light does not choose intentionally, but its limitations function like selection. Only what survives the journey is heard. Everything else is silence. And silence is ambiguous. Silence can mean nothing happened, or it can mean something happened, too briefly, too faintly, or too far away to be recorded. From your vantage point, these possibilities are indistinguishable. This is where the concept of truth fractures, because truth now depends not only on what is said, but on what could not be said. And light does not tell you what it failed to carry. This creates a dangerous comfort, because what you see feels complete. The sky is full, rich, layered. It gives no indication of how much is missing, which encourages confidence. You feel like you are seeing the universe, but in reality, you are seeing a sample, a biased one. This is where the phrase, "the universe is telling us a story," must be handled carefully. Stories have structure, they have continuity, they have coherence. But reality does not promise narrative clarity. Light imposes narrative structure. By smoothing over interruptions, it connects what arrived into a seamless picture, and your mind finishes the job. It assumes causality. It assumes progression. It assumes that what you see is representative of what exists. This assumption works locally. It fails globally, and the failure grows with distance. At extreme distances, light does not just distort timing, it distorts proportion. Early galaxies appear more common than they were. Certain types of objects dominate because their signals travel better. Others vanish entirely, which means the further back you look, the less representative the picture becomes. And yet, paradoxically, the further back you look, the more confident you may feel, because ancient light feels fundamental. It feels closer to origins, closer to truth. But closeness to origin does not guarantee completeness. It guarantees scarcity. You are working with the earliest surviving signals, not the full record. This realization introduces a new kind of uncertainty. Not uncertainty about measurements, but uncertainty about what you are allowed to know. The universe is not just withholding its present, it is withholding parts of its past as well. Entire chapters may have left no detectable trace, not because they were insignificant, but because they were brief, or quiet, or poorly aligned with the physics of transmission, which means that the story you reconstruct is shaped by survivorship, and survivorship is not neutral. This is the same mistake made in other domains. We study the survivors of systems and assume they represent the whole. We forget the failures, the collapses, the things that left no record. The universe invites the same error. Light shows you what endured and hides what did not. And endurance masquerades as importance. This is where the trust in light must be recalibrated. Not abandoned, but humbled. Light is an extraordinary messenger. Without it, you would know almost nothing. But it is not an omniscient one. It cannot tell you what never emitted. It cannot tell you what faded too fast. It cannot tell you what happened after it left. And yet, you are tempted to treat it as if it can. Because it arrives so convincingly, so calmly, so persistently. The universe looks stable because instability struggles to announce itself. The universe looks ancient because ancient things have had time to speak. The universe looks complete because you cannot see what is missing, and this illusion is reinforced. Every time you point a telescope at the sky, the deeper you look, The more ancient the light, the more filtered the truth becomes. This does not invalidate what you see, but it does change how you should interpret it. You are not watching reality unfold. You are decoding residue. Residue shaped by physics, by distance, by time, by survival. And residue, by definition, is what remains after something else has passed. Means that the universe you know is already a remainder, not the whole. This understanding sets the stage for the next shift, because once you accept that light carries information, but not context, accuracy but not immediacy, truth but not completeness, you begin to question something deeper. If our primary source of cosmic knowledge is inherently partial and delayed, then what does it mean to claim that we understand the universe at all? Understanding depends on trust. Trust in signals, trust in models, trust that the picture we assemble corresponds to something real. But if light itself is an unreliable guide to the present, then perhaps the instability lies not just in perception, but in knowledge. That question is no longer about physics alone. It is about epistemology, about the limits of knowing in a universe that never speaks in real time. And once that question is raised, it does not stay confined to the stars. It turns inward, toward the frameworks we use to describe reality, toward the assumptions we barely notice, toward the quiet belief that the universe is, at some level, knowable as a whole. That belief is about to be tested, and what follows will not be resolved by looking farther away, but by examining the very tools we rely on to make sense of what arrives. There comes a moment when the question quietly changes. Up to now, you have been asking what you are seeing: ancient light, delayed signals, ghost galaxies, incomplete information. But here, another question begins to surface, one that does not look outward, but inward. If everything you observe arrives late, if every image is a residue of what once was, then where exactly are you standing when you say, now? This is the point where the idea of the present begins to unravel. We speak of now as if it were a universal condition, a shared instant, a thin slice of time that everyone and everything occupies together. But the universe does not acknowledge this slice. It cannot, because now depends on simultaneity, and simultaneity does not survive distance. Two events separated by enough space cannot be said to occur at the same time. In any absolute sense, this is not philosophy, it is physics. The speed of light enforces it. Signals take time to travel. Information cannot move instantly, which means that agreement about now requires communication, and communication is always delayed. At small scales, this delay is negligible. Your brain assumes simultaneity because the error is too small to matter. But at cosmic scales, the error becomes everything, which means the universe does not have a single present. It has countless local presents, each valid only within its own frame. This is where the earlier discomfort sharpens into something deeper. Because if there is no universal now, then the idea that you are observing reality as it unfolds becomes untenable. You are always observing someone else's past, and someone else, somewhere far away, is observing your past in return. No one is ever fully aligned. The universe does not tick together, it drifts. This is the turning point, because until now, it was possible to believe that the present exists somewhere, even if you cannot access it directly. But here, that belief becomes difficult to sustain. If now cannot be defined globally, then it may not exist as a property of the universe at all. It may exist only as a local convenience, a mental construct, a coordination tool, useful, necessary, but not fundamental. And this realization changes the meaning of everything you have already learned. Light is delayed because time is not shared. Information is incomplete because reality is not synchronized. The sky looks coherent because your perception forces coherence onto something that never had it. The universe does not unfold in a single narrative. It unfolds in overlapping, misaligned timelines that never fully agree, which means the idea of a cosmic present moment is an illusion created by proximity. It works near you. It fails far away. And the farther you look, the less meaningful it becomes. This is why the present dissolves. As you move outward, at 1 light year, now is slightly blurred. At 1,000 light years, it is fractured. At millions, it is meaningless. And at the edge of the observable universe, it does not exist at all. Not seeing what is happening. You are seeing what has happened, and there is no frame from which all of this could be assembled into a single moment. This creates a profound conceptual shift, because if the universe does not share a present, then change does not occur in time the way you imagine. It occurs across time. Events do not line up neatly. They ripple outward, each carrying its own delayed imprint. Reality becomes a web of afterimages, and you live inside the overlap. This is where many people instinctively resist. The idea that now is not universal feels destabilizing. It threatens the sense of immediacy, of agency, of being here. But the discomfort does not come from falsity. It comes from habit. Your mind evolved to function locally. It was never meant to model the universe as a whole, so it borrows assumptions that work nearby and extends them outward. And those assumptions break. This is not a flaw of intelligence. It is a consequence of scale. The universe is not obligated to match your intuitions. And here, intuition fails quietly, because the sky still looks present. The stars still feel alive. The image does not announce that it belongs to different eras. Everything arrives together and pretends to belong together. But this togetherness is an illusion. The universe you see is temporally layered, different ages stacked into a single view, and your mind, unable to separate them, calls the whole thing now, unquote. But that word has lost its meaning, which raises a deeper question. If the present is not universal, then what does it mean to say that something exists right now? Existence becomes frame-dependent, local, relative. Something can exist in your present and be long gone in another. Something can exist elsewhere and never enter your present at all. This is not speculation. It is the structure of space-time. And once you accept this, you are forced to reconsider what observation actually gives you. Observation does not reveal reality as it is. It reveals reality as it intersects with your light cone, your causal bubble, your accessible region of space-time. Everything else is out of sync or out of reach entirely, which means that knowledge is not global. It is situated. You do not know the universe. You know your intersection with it, and that intersection is always delayed. This reframes the entire project of understanding, because it means that models of the universe are not maps of what exists now. They are reconstructions of what could have existed, given what has arrived. They are historical syntheses, and history, no matter how precise, is always retrospective. This is why certainty feels so fragile at cosmic scales, not because the data is weak, but because the concept of current state does not apply. The universe is not a machine that can be inspected in real time. It is a process that can only be sampled after the fact. And sampling after the fact always misses something. This brings us back to the quiet unease that has followed this journey from the beginning. The sense that something is wrong, not morally, not emotionally, but structurally. You are trying to understand a system that does not present itself all at once, that never aligns its parts, that refuses to share a common moment. And yet, you keep using language that assumes it does. You speak of the universe now, of its current age, its present expansion rate, its current structure. These phrases are convenient. They are necessary for communication, but they hide a deeper truth. There is no cosmic now to anchor them to. There is only a collection of local nows, each valid only where it occurs. And your own now is just one of them. This is the subtle but critical twist of this chapter. The problem is no longer that light is delayed. The problem is that time itself is fragmented, not broken, not chaotic, but fundamentally local. And locality changes everything, because it means that even if light were instant, even if you could see everything at once, there would still be no single present. The universe would still be out of sync with itself, which means the illusion of simultaneity was never sustainable. Light delay merely exposes it. This realization should not make the universe feel meaningless. It should make it feel more honest. As it removes an expectation the universe never agreed to meet. It was never going to unfold as a single story. It was never going to offer a shared moment. It was always going to be a patchwork of overlapping times, and you were always going to live inside one small patch. This does not diminish your experience. It contextualizes it. You are not late to the universe. There is no schedule. You are not missing the present. There is no universal present to miss. There is only your present, constructed from what has reached you. And that construction is real, even if it is not complete. This is where the tone begins to shift. Up to now, the revelations have felt like loss. Loss of immediacy, loss of certainty, loss of access. But here, something quieter emerges, a reframing. If the universe does not share a present, then perhaps the burden of synchrony was never meant to be carried. Perhaps meaning does not depend on simultaneity. Perhaps understanding does not require complete alignment. Perhaps the universe is not something to be captured in a single frame, but something to be experienced from within your own. This thought does not resolve the tension. It transforms it, because now the question is no longer, what is happening now in the universe? In first, that question has no answer. The question becomes, what does it mean to exist in a universe that is never fully present to itself? That question is not about astronomy. It is about being. And once it is asked, the journey can no longer remain purely outward. It must turn inward again, toward the structures of knowledge, toward the limits of explanation, toward the quiet assumptions we rarely examine, because the next thing to break is not the idea of time. It is the idea that understanding the universe means standing outside it. That illusion is about to dissolve, and when it does, what remains will feel far more intimate than the night sky ever did. Once the idea of a universal present collapses, something else quietly follows it. The belief that understanding requires distance. For a long time, we have imagined knowledge as something achieved by stepping back, by observing from the outside, by separating ourselves from what we study. We picture the universe as an object and ourselves as its audience. But that picture only works if the universe presents itself all at once, if there is a single state to inspect, a unified moment to analyze. And you already know now there isn't. Which means the idea of standing outside the universe, looking in, was always an illusion. You were never outside. You were always inside a moving slice of it, receiving fragments. This is where a subtle but profound tension appears, because science depends on models, and models depend on the assumption that there is something stable to model, a system, a state, a configuration that can be described. But if the universe does not share a present, then what exactly are our models describing? They cannot be describing what is happening now, because now has no global meaning. They must be describing something else. A statistical average, a reconstruction, a best fit story, assembled from delayed signals. This does not make science false, but it changes what science is. It becomes interpretive rather than descriptive, inferential rather than direct. You are not reading reality. You are inferring it. And inference always depends on assumptions. Most of the time, those assumptions remain invisible. You assume continuity. You assume that structures persist. You assume that what you see is representative of what exists. These assumptions work remarkably well locally. They fail quietly at scale. This is where the feeling of something is wrong returns again, not as confusion, but as a kind of epistemic vertigo. If knowledge is built from delayed fragments, then certainty becomes conditional. Truth becomes provisional. Understanding becomes an act of alignment rather than capture. And alignment is fragile. You can align different signals into a coherent picture, but that picture is always behind the events that produced it, which means the universe you understand is never the universe that exists right now. It is the universe that once existed, in a way that could reach you. Realization destabilizes a deep assumption that the universe is, in principle, fully knowable, because knowability requires access, and access requires simultaneity. You have neither. This does not mean the universe is mysterious by choice. It means it is structured in a way that does not privilege observers. You are not the reference frame. You are just another location, and locations do not see everything. This is where humility enters, not as a moral stance, but as a physical necessity. The universe does not hide from you. It simply does not organize itself around your ability to observe, which means that any picture you form is necessarily partial. But partiality is not obvious, because coherence feels like completeness. When different pieces of information fit together, the mind relaxes. It feels like understanding, but coherence can emerge. Even when large portions are missing, a puzzle can feel finished, even when entire sections were never included, especially if you never knew they existed. This is how the universe presents itself. It offers you a coherent slice, not the whole, and because the slice is consistent, you mistake it for totality. This is not a failure of intelligence. It is a feature of cognition. Your brain evolved to operate in environments where missing information usually meant danger, so it fills gaps aggressively. It prefers a complete story, even a wrong one, over uncertainty. The universe exploits this tendency unintentionally. It supplies just enough information to allow a story to form, and the story feels real. This is why cosmological models are so seductive. They give shape to vastness. They impose order on delay. They transform overlapping pasts into a narrative of evolution, and that narrative is powerful. It explains origins. It predicts futures. It connects distant phenomena into a single framework, but frameworks are not mirrors. They are scaffolds. They support understanding without being identical to what they support. And scaffolds can give the illusion of solidity, even when the structure beneath is incomplete. This is where the twist of this chapter deepens. The problem is not that our models are wrong. The problem is that we forget. They are local solutions. They describe the universe as it appears from here, not as it exists everywhere. And that distinction matters, because the universe does not owe consistency across frames. It does not guarantee that patterns observed here hold elsewhere. It does not promise that averages apply universally. It only promises that the laws are consistent locally. Beyond that, all bets are off. This is why extrapolation is dangerous. You take what you see in one region, one era, one slice of time, and extend it outward. Sometimes this works beautifully. Sometimes it fails catastrophically. And you often cannot tell which until much later, because failure also arrives late. This is why cosmology is filled with revisions. Theories rise, they stabilize, they feel inevitable. Then new data arrives, and the picture bends, not because the old data was false, but because it was incomplete. And incompleteness is invisible until something fills the gap. This is where the concept of a final theory begins to feel naive. A final theory would require complete access. It would require the ability to observe the universe as a whole, not in pieces, not in echoes, as a simultaneous entity. And that is physically impossible, which means that understanding the universe is not a destination. It is a process without closure, an ongoing negotiation between what has arrived and what has not. This reframes the role of the observer. You are not a passive recipient of truth. You are an active participant. In its construction, you choose which signals to trust, which patterns to prioritize, which gaps to ignore. Not arbitrarily, but inevitably, because you cannot process everything. And what you cannot process might matter more than what you can. This is the quiet danger of confidence. Confidence grows when explanations fit, but fitting does not mean finished. The universe has a way of remaining consistent right up until it doesn't. And the reason is not deception, it is scale. Small samples behave well, large systems surprise. And the universe is the largest system imaginable. Means surprise is not an anomaly. It is the default. This is why the feeling of wrongness has persisted through every chapter. It is not pointing to a specific error. It is pointing to a structural mismatch between a mind that seeks completeness and a universe that never offers it, between a desire for total understanding and a reality that only reveals fragments. This mismatch cannot be resolved. It can only be acknowledged. And acknowledgement changes how you interpret everything. You stop asking for final answers. You stop expecting closure. You begin to treat knowledge as a moving boundary, a frontier that shifts as new signals arrive, and arrival is always late. This perspective does not weaken science, it strengthens it, because it replaces certainty with adaptability. It replaces authority with revision. It accepts that models are temporary by design, not because we are ignorant, but because the universe is large. And largeness breaks simultaneity, which breaks finality. This brings us to a quieter realization. Understanding the universe was never about possessing it. It was about participating in it, receiving what arrives, making sense of it locally, remaining open to change. You are not meant to stand outside reality and define it. You are meant to exist inside it and respond. This is a very different posture. It trades mastery for orientation. It replaces control with coherence. And coherence does not require completeness. It requires consistency within limits. This is where the tone begins to soften. Up to now, the journey has been about loss. Loss of immediacy, loss of access, loss of certainty. But here, something else appears, a different kind of grounding. If the universe cannot be known as a whole, then you are released from the burden of total understanding. You no longer need to reconcile everything. You no longer need to see the entire picture. You only need to navigate the slice you inhabit. This does not make the universe smaller. It makes your place within it clearer. You are not failing to grasp the whole. The whole is not graspable, and that is not a flaw. It is a property. The universe is not an object to be captured. It is a field to be inhabited. And habitation does not require omniscience. It requires responsiveness. This shift prepares the ground for what comes next. Because once you stop trying to stand outside the universe, you begin to ask a different question. Not, what is the universe really like? End quote. But what does it mean to be a conscious fragment inside something that can never be fully present to itself? Isenfort. That question moves us out of cosmology and into something more intimate, not philosophy in the abstract, but existence as lived. Because the next layer of this story is no longer about galaxies or light. It is about you, as a time-delayed observer, trying to make meaning inside a universe that never synchronizes. That turn is coming, and when it does, the night sky will stop feeling distant. It will feel uncomfortably close. At first, the question sounds almost absurd. Can light lie? Not exaggerate, not distort intentionally, not deceive with purpose. Lee, the word feels misplaced in physics. Too human, too moral. And yet, the longer you sit with everything you have uncovered, the harder it becomes to ignore what the question is really asking. Not whether light has intentions, but whether truth can survive when information is detached from time. Because up to now, you have been generous with light. You have treated it as a neutral courier, a faithful messenger carrying fragments of reality across vast distances. Delayed, yes. Incomplete, yes. But still fundamentally trustworthy. This chapter is where that trust must be examined carefully, not to be discarded, but to be understood at its limits. Light does not lie in the human sense. It does not choose to mislead, but it can create a false impression of completeness, and that may be far more dangerous. Consider what it means to say that light carries information. When a photon reaches you, it encodes precise physical details about the moment it was emitted: temperature, motion, composition. From these details, you infer structure. From structure, you infer behavior. From behavior, you infer meaning. And the chain feels solid. Hidden inside this process is an assumption so natural that it rarely comes into focus, that the information you receive is still relevant to the state of the source. Relevance is not guaranteed by accuracy. A message can be perfectly accurate and still be misleading if it arrives too late. This is the uncomfortable space where light operates. It tells the truth about a moment that no longer exists, and it does so without telling you that the moment has passed. This is not deception by commission. It is deception by omission. Light does not say, by the way, everything may have changed. Due the side of man, it cannot. Once emitted, it has no awareness of the future, which means that every photon you receive is frozen testimony, a statement sealed at the moment of release, and sealed statements grow more ambiguous the longer they travel. This is where the idea of light lying begins to feel less provocative and more precise, because lies are not always falsehoods. Sometimes they are truths, presented without context. And context, at cosmic scales, is everything. Imagine watching a recording of a city street. The footage is clear, high resolution, accurate. Cars move, people walk, shops are open. The recording tells no lies, but the footage is from decades ago. Since then, the street has been demolished. If you mistake the recording for the present, you will be wrong. Not because the image lied, but because you assumed relevance. Light invites the same mistake. It presents an image with no timestamp visible to intuition. Your instruments can infer age. Your equations can calculate delay. But your experience, the immediate sense of seeing, treats the image as current. This is where the illusion becomes powerful. Because your brain is not built to distrust clarity, clear signals feel authoritative. They feel like truth. And light is extraordinarily clear. It travels cleanly. It preserves structure. It arrives intact. So when you see a galaxy with sharp arms, when you detect a bright emission line, when you map a structure with precision, your mind concludes, this exists. Is, not, this existed, end quote. That small shift in tense is where the distortion lives, and the distortion compounds. Because light does not show you change directly. It shows you states. It freezes motion into snapshots. And the longer the exposure, the more motion disappears. At cosmic scales, even dramatic transformations are flattened into stillness. A galaxy that is actively shutting down may look indistinguishable from one that is stable. A star on the brink of collapse may look serene. The image carries no warning, which means that light systematically underrepresents transition. It favors what appears stable over what is becoming unstable, and stability feels like truth. This is where the lie takes shape, not as a single false statement, but as a consistent bias. A bias toward persistence, a bias toward calm, a bias toward order. The universe you see is quieter than the universe that exists, not because chaos is rare, but because chaos is brief, and brief things do not leave long trails of light. This is survivorship bias, written into physics. Only what lasts gets to be seen. Only what shines steadily fills space with evidence, which means that the universe you reconstruct from light is dominated by survivors. And survivors do not tell the full story. They tell the story of what endured, not what struggled, collapsed, or vanished quickly. This matters more than it first appears, because it shapes how you imagine the nature of reality itself. A universe dominated by long-lived structures feels orderly. A universe dominated by stable patterns feels governed. A universe that looks calm feels predictable. But this impression may be an artifact, a smoothing imposed by time delay and signal persistence. Reality may be far more turbulent than anything you can see, and the turbulence may be the most important part. Light does not capture turbulence well. It averages it out. This averaging creates a subtle falsehood that the universe changes slowly, that large-scale structures evolve gently, that violence is rare. But these conclusions depend on visibility, not frequency. Events that are brief are less visible. Events that are slow dominate the image. Means that your understanding of cosmic history is weighted toward the long and the slow, not necessarily toward the significant. This is where the word lie begins to feel justified, not as an accusation, but as a warning. Light tells the truth about what it can carry, but what it can carry is not everything that matters, and what it cannot carry disappears from your picture of reality without leaving a mark. This is why absence is so dangerous. You cannot distinguish between nothing happened and something happened too fast to be seen. Watch, silence does not explain itself, which means that entire categories of events may be underrepresented or missing entirely from your understanding, not because they did not occur, but because light could not preserve them. This realization destabilizes a deep intuition. We tend to believe that what we see most often is what exists most often, but the universe does not reward frequency. It rewards duration. A rare, long-lived phenomenon will dominate the sky. A common, short-lived one may leave almost no trace, which means that prevalence and visibility are not aligned, and this misalignment matters. When you try to understand how the universe behaves, you are learning from a biased dataset, not intentionally biased, but physically biased. The bias is built into the messenger. This is where the chapter's twist deepens further. Because once you recognize that light is biased toward persistence, you begin to suspect something unsettling. Perhaps the universe feels ancient, not just because it is old, but because ancient things have had more time to speak. Perhaps the early universe dominates cosmological narratives, not only because it was formative, but because its signals had billions of years to arrive. Perhaps our focus on beginnings is not purely intellectual, but observationally enforced. The past shouts, the present whispers, the future is silent. Light does not balance these voices. It amplifies one and erases the others, which means that the story you tell about the universe is shaped by the order in which information arrives, and arrival order is not neutral. This reframes the idea of cosmic truth entirely. Truth is no longer a static correspondence between image and object. It becomes a negotiation between signal and delay, between what survived and what did not, between what could speak and what never got the chance. And negotiation implies uncertainty, not error, uncertainty. This is why cosmology is filled with confidence and caveats. At the same time, we know many things with high precision, but we also know that our picture is incomplete, and that incompleteness is structural. It is not a gap waiting to be filled. It is a boundary that cannot be crossed. Light will never carry the missing context. No improvement in technology can fix that. Faster telescopes see fainter light. They do not make it newer. Better detectors capture subtler signals. They do not restore lost events. The limitation is not resolution. It is temporality, which means that every advance in observation sharpens the same paradox. You see more clearly, but not more presently. The universe becomes more detailed, but not more current, and clarity without currency can mislead, not maliciously, but consistently. This is why the phrase, "what the universe is telling us," must be handled with care. The universe is not speaking to you, it is leaving behind traces, and you are interpreting them. Interpretation always involves choice. You choose which signals to emphasize, which patterns to trust, which absences to ignore, not consciously, but inevitably. And once you see that, the authority of light becomes contextual. It is no longer an oracle, it is a witness. And witnesses are limited by where they stood. And when they spoke, light stood at the past. It spoke once, and it never updated its testimony. This does not mean you should distrust what you see. It means you should distrust the feeling that what you see is complete. The sky is not lying to you in the sense of presenting falsehoods, but it is lying in the sense that it feels finished. It feels like a full picture, and that feeling is wrong because the picture is assembled from what endured. And endurance is not the same as reality. Reality includes collapse, transition. Events that left no mark, those are missing, not hidden, missing. This is the deepest danger of light. Not that it deceives, but that it convinces. It convinces you that what you are seeing is enough. Enough to understand, enough to explain, enough to conclude, and that conviction is comforting. But comfort is not accuracy. As we move forward, this realization will force another shift. Up to now, the focus has been on what is missing from the universe. What cannot be seen, what has slipped away, what lies beyond horizons. But soon, the focus will turn again toward what remains, toward the fact that despite all of this delay, bias, and incompleteness, meaning still emerges, patterns still form, understanding still grows. And that raises a quieter, more surprising question. If the universe is always speaking from the past, if light is always late and incomplete, why does anything still make sense at all? That question does not accuse the universe of lying. It asks why coherence survives. And the answer to that will begin to soften the tone of everything that follows. Because what comes next is not about loss. It is about adaptation, about how meaning arises inside limitation, about why, even in a museum of ancient light, you can still find orientation. That turn is coming, and when it does, the night sky will begin to feel less deceptive and more patient. There is a quiet paradox hiding beneath everything you've learned so far. If the universe only ever shows you the past, if light is delayed, incomplete, biased toward what endured, if entire regions of reality are permanently inaccessible, then why does anything still make sense? Why does the sky not feel random? Why do patterns emerge at all? Why can you build models, make predictions, and find coherence inside something so fragmented? This is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because despite all the delay, despite all the missing information, the universe does not appear chaotic. It appears structured, and structure demands explanation. At first, this seems contradictory. You have learned that observation is always late. That perception smooths over instability. That light favors persistence. All of this should erode clarity, and yet clarity remains. Galaxies fall into recognizable forms. Stars follow predictable life cycles. Large-scale structures repeat themselves across space. The universe looks like it has rules, not because you imposed them, but because they keep appearing. This persistence of pattern is not accidental. It is not a coincidence born of limited data. It is the consequence of something deeper. The universe may not share a present, but it shares constraints, and constraints survive delay. This is the crucial shift of this chapter. While light cannot carry the present, it can carry regularity. It cannot tell you what is happening now, but it can reveal what tends to happen. This is why knowledge remains possible, even in a delayed universe. Because although events are fleeting, processes endure. Stars may be born and die, but the physics governing their lives does not change quickly. Galaxies may collide, but gravity behaves the same across vast spans of time. Expansion stretches space, but it does so consistently. These underlying rules persist longer than any individual event, which means that while the universe you see is always outdated, the relationships within it remain legible. You are not learning the universe's state, you are learning its tendencies. And tendencies are remarkably robust to delay. This is why a universe built from ancient light can still feel intelligible, because intelligibility does not require immediacy. It requires stability of law, and this stability is what allows meaning to emerge from fragments. Think of it this way. You never observe a single moment of the universe. You observe many moments from different times, stitched together. But if the same rules apply across those moments, patterns align. The past becomes a usable proxy for the present. Not perfectly, not completely, but sufficiently. This is why prediction is possible at all. You are not predicting specific events, you are predicting behavior. And behavior is governed by constraints that outlast individual occurrences. This is where the idea of data quietly transforms. The universe is not giving you live footage. It is giving you statistical residue, and statistics thrive on repetition. One event tells you little. 1,000,000 delayed events tell you a lot. Even if those events are old, their accumulation reveals structure. This is why cosmology works. Despite everything you've uncovered, it does not rely on immediacy. It relies on consistency, and consistency is a deeper form of truth than presence. This realization reframes the earlier fear that light might be lying. If you can side, light is not a storyteller trying to narrate reality moment by moment. It is a sampler. It samples the universe across time and delivers those samples. Without synchronization, your task is not to reconstruct the present. It is to recognize the invariants, the things that do not change easily. Those invariants are the skeleton of reality. They persist even when everything else is misaligned. This is why the universe feels ancient, but not arbitrary. Old light still obeys the same laws as new light. Delayed signals still encode the same relationships, and relationships are what matter. This is where the idea of truth must be redefined. Truth is not a snapshot. It is not a perfect mirror of what exists now. Truth is constraint-aware coherence, a structure that remains valid across many delayed observations, which means that truth is not undermined by time. It is tested by it. False patterns collapse when viewed across different eras. True constraints persist. This is why scientific understanding grows stronger as more ancient light is collected, not because you are seeing more of the present, but because you are seeing more instances of the same underlying behavior. Delay does not destroy truth. It filters it. Only what is stable survives widespread observation. This is the opposite of how fear frames the situation. It is tempting to believe that delay robs you of reality, but delay also protects you from being misled by the transient. The universe does not show you every flicker, every instability, every brief anomaly. It shows you what lasted long enough to be sampled repeatedly, and what can be sampled repeatedly is what can be understood. This is not a conspiracy. It is a consequence of scale. Large systems reveal themselves through averages. Small, violent events matter locally, but they dissolve into noise at cosmic distances. This does not make them unimportant. It makes them contextual, and context is what the universe withholds. But context is not the same as structure. You lose one, you retain the other. This distinction is critical because it means that while you cannot know everything that happened, you can know how things tend to happen, and tendency is enough to build orientation. Orientation does not require completeness. It requires reliability. This is why, even inside a museum of ancient light, you are not lost. The exhibits are old, but the layout makes sense. The rules governing the space are consistent. You can navigate. This brings us to a quieter realization. Perhaps the universe was never meant to be known in the way you once imagined. Not as a present tense object that can be fully captured, but as a system of constraints that reveals itself gradually through residue. In this view, knowledge is not about catching up to reality. It is about aligning with its regularities. You are not late. There is nothing to catch. There is only interpretation, and interpretation improves as patterns repeat. This perspective softens the earlier anxiety. Yes, the universe is delayed. Yes, much is missing, but what remains is not arbitrary. It is curated by endurance. And endurance, while biased, is also informative. This is why the universe feels intelligible, despite being fragmented, because fragments still obey rules. And rules are the deep grammar of existence. This grammar does not require simultaneity. It does not require a shared present. It only requires consistency across time, which the universe provides abundantly. This also explains something subtle about why the universe feels older than it feels chaotic. Age accumulates evidence. Chaos does not. The longer a structure persists, the more likely it is to be seen, which means that old, stable features dominate your understanding. This dominance is not a lie. It's a reflection of what lasts, and what lasts is what defines large-scale reality. This is not to say that the universe is gentle. It is not. It is restless at small scales, violent in bursts, unpredictable locally. But large-scale structure emerges from averaging, and averaging is the only thing that survives distance. This is why the universe looks smooth when viewed from afar, not because it is smooth, but because roughness cancels out. This insight reframes your relationship with what you see. You are not looking at reality directly. You are looking at what survived averaging, and survival through averaging is not arbitrary. It reveals constraints. This is the quiet answer to the paradox that opened this chapter. Meaning survives because meaning is built from regularity. Regularity survives because it is reinforced across time. Delay does not erase it. Bias does not eliminate it. Incompleteness does not destroy it. They merely shape the way it appears. This does not mean you should trust the universe blindly, but it does mean you should trust patterns more than images. Trust relationships over snapshots. Trust behavior over appearance. This is the subtle maturity that cosmic understanding demands, not certainty, orientation. And orientation does not require knowing everything. It requires knowing enough to move without illusion. This prepares the ground for the next shift. Because once you understand that meaning arises from constraint rather than immediacy, a new question surfaces. If coherence emerges from limitation, if understanding grows, not despite delay, but because of what delay filters out, then perhaps the universe's silence is not a failure. Perhaps it is a condition that makes meaning possible at all. That thought marks a turning from loss to adaptation, from frustration to acceptance, from longing for the present to working with residue, and that acceptance will soon lead to a different kind of inquiry, not about what the universe hides, but about why, within all this delay and absence, you still feel oriented, why existence still feels navigable, why, even in a universe that never speaks in real time, you are not completely lost. That question does not belong to cosmology alone. It belongs to consciousness. And that is where the journey is slowly drifting next. At some point, a quiet thought begins to surface. If everything you see has already happened, if the universe only ever reaches you through memory, if reality arrives as residue rather than presence, then what does it mean to act? This question does not announce itself loudly. It does not feel dramatic. It feels almost improper, because action implies immediacy. Choice implies a moment that matters now, and yet, everything you have uncovered seems to undermine the idea of a meaningful present. The universe you see is old. The information you receive is delayed. The patterns you understand are averages across time. So where does agency fit into this picture? Where does decision live? Inside a reality that never fully arrives? This is where many people instinctively retreat. They accept the science. They accept the delay, but they quietly fence it off. From questions about meaning, they say, yes, the universe is old and delayed, but that doesn't change anything important, end quote. And at first glance, that feels reasonable. After all, you still wake up. You still choose. You still feel the weight of consequence. Nothing seems diminished. But if you stay with the idea long enough, a tension forms. Because if all information is delayed, then every choice you make is based on an outdated picture of reality. You are never responding to what is. You are responding to what was. This is not speculation. It is unavoidable. When you decide to move, your brain is already interpreting signals that arrived moments ago. When you speak, you are responding to sounds that have already passed. When you look up at the sky and feel awe or comfort, you are reacting to events that may have ended long before you existed. And yet, your actions still matter. They still change something. This is the paradox that defines existence inside a delayed universe. Your knowledge is always retrospective, but your influence is not. You act forward into a reality you cannot fully see. This is where the idea of determinism quietly enters the conversation. Because if everything you see is already in the past, it is tempting to imagine that everything is already decided, that the universe is a completed story. You are merely reading late. But this temptation is misleading. It confuses observation with causation. Yes, you observe the past, but you do not act on the past. You act on the present. Even if you cannot see it clearly, the present still exists as a region of causality. It is not visible globally. It is not shared universally, but it is real where you stand. This is a crucial distinction. The universe may not share a single present, but local presents still exist, and local presents are enough for agency to operate. Your actions do not require a global snapshot of reality. They require only that causes precede effects locally, and they do. Physics guarantees that. Even in a fragmented universe, causality holds in neighborhoods. Your choices ripple outward from where you are. They affect nearby states. They alter future possibilities, and those ripples will, eventually, become someone else's ancient light. This is where the feeling of fatalism dissolves. You are not living inside a completed script. You are living inside a system where information arrives late, but causation unfolds locally. The universe is not predetermined in the way the illusion suggests. It is simply unsynchronized. This difference matters because unsynchronization does not eliminate freedom. It complicates awareness. You are free to act without being fully informed, and that is not a flaw. It is the default condition of every living system. Even on Earth, you never act with perfect information. You guess, you infer, you extrapolate, and somehow life persists. This is where the universe begins to feel less hostile and more familiar, because the same structure that governs cosmic delay also governs everyday existence. You have always lived in a partial information world. The only difference now is scale. Cosmic delay makes the condition obvious, but it did not create it. This realization reframes the earlier anxiety. The universe is not mocking your attempts to understand. It is simply operating under constraints that apply everywhere. No agent, human or otherwise, ever acts with full knowledge of the present. Complete information is a fantasy, and agency does not require it. Agency requires responsiveness, not omniscience. This is why meaning does not collapse. In a delayed universe, it changes shape. Meaning is no longer about aligning perfectly with reality. It is about navigating uncertainty, about choosing under constraint, about acting despite delay. This is not a cosmic tragedy. It is a universal condition. Every organism on Earth operates this way. They respond to signals that are already outdated. They adapt to environments they cannot fully observe. They survive not by knowing everything, but by knowing enough. And this logic scales upward. You are not an exception. You are an instance. The universe does not demand that you understand it completely. Before acting, it never offered that possibility. It offers something else instead, a consistent causal structure within which local action matters. This is why the future is not closed. Even though the past dominates what you see, the future is shaped by interactions that have not yet emitted light. Your actions are among them. Somewhere, far in the future, the light carrying the consequences of what you do today will reach someone else. They will see a residue. They will reconstruct a story. They will not see your present, but your present will have mattered. This introduces a subtle inversion. You are not a passive observer, trapped in ancient light. You are an active source of future light. You are not just reading the universe. You are writing part of it. And what you write will not be seen immediately. It will travel. It will be delayed. It will be filtered, but it will exist. This restores a sense of participation that the earlier chapters seem to erode. You are not excluded from reality because you cannot see it in real time. You are embedded in it because you contribute to its future states. The universe is not a static archive. It is a moving process in which you are involved. Simply experience it asymmetrically. You see backward. You act forward. This asymmetry is not accidental. It is fundamental, and it explains why the universe feels strange, but not meaningless. The past is visible because it has already happened. The future is invisible because it is still being shaped, and you stand at the boundary between them. This boundary is where life exists, not in perfect knowledge, not in timeless awareness, but in motion, which brings us back to the earlier idea of the universe as a museum. Museums display the past, but they are built in the present by people who act. The existence of the museum does not freeze the future. It contextualizes the past. The universe does something similar. It displays ancient light, but it does not prevent new events from occurring. It does not lock reality into what has already been seen. The illusion of determinism comes from mistaking visibility for completeness. You see the past clearly and mistake that clarity for finality. But clarity is not closure. The future is opaque, not absent, and opacity is where possibility lives. This is why the sense of helplessness never quite takes hold. Even after all the revelations, you still feel that your actions matter because they do, not because you understand everything, but because the universe is structured to allow influence without foresight. This is the deepest compatibility between physics and meaning. You are not required to see the whole, to matter. You are required to exist locally and act causally, and you do. This reframes the role of consciousness. Consciousness is not a window onto the universe as it is. It is a tool for navigating what you cannot fully see. It evolved not to reveal cosmic truth, but to guide action under uncertainty. And uncertainty is not an error state. It is the default. The universe does not resolve itself before you act. It resolves itself because you act, not all at once, not globally, but locally, gradually. This perspective dissolves the final fear that delayed knowledge might render existence pointless. Meaning does not require simultaneity. It requires causal relevance, and relevance is always local. What happens here matters here. What happens now matters now. Even if now is not universal, this is enough. Not for total understanding, but for orientation. And orientation is what living systems need. As this chapter settles, the tone begins to soften further. The universe is no longer a trickster, showing you ghosts. It is a vast system, within which delay and agency coexist. You are not late to reality. You are positioned within it. And that position, partial, delayed, uncertain, is not a flaw. It is the condition that makes participation possible. As we move forward, the remaining chapters will not undo what has been revealed. They will deepen it, not by returning to the sky, but by lingering with what it means to live, choose, and find calm inside a universe that never speaks in the present tense. Because the final movement of this journey is not about knowledge. It is about rest, about what happens when you stop demanding immediacy from a cosmos that never offered it. And that is where the quietest insight of all is waiting. At some point, after the questions settle and the tension loosens, a quieter realization begins to surface. You have been thinking about stars, about galaxies, about ancient light traveling across impossible distances. But without noticing, the focus has been drifting somewhere else, toward you. Because everything you have learned about the universe, the delay, the incompleteness, the absence of a shared present, is not unique to the cosmos. It is mirrored inside you. You are not just a witness to delayed reality. You are made of delay. Every thought you have, every sensation, every feeling of continuity is the result of signals arriving late, being integrated, and smoothed into something that feels whole. This is where the story becomes intimate, because the same mechanisms that turn the universe into a museum of light also turn your consciousness into a museum of moments. You never experience the present directly. You experience a reconstruction. Neuron fire, signals propagate, patterns form. By the time awareness emerges, the event that triggered it has already passed. Yet, your experience feels seamless. It feels like, now, art. This is not an accident. It is a necessary illusion. Without it, there would be no stable sense of self, no continuity, no identity. You would exist as disconnected flashes, with no narrative thread. The brain cannot allow that, so it does something remarkable. It integrates the past into a moving present. It takes delayed signals and weaves them into a coherent stream. That stream is consciousness. And consciousness, like the night sky, looks calm only because instability has been averaged out. Your sense of being you is not a snapshot. It is a long exposure. Tiny fluctuations in mood, brief neural noise, micro instabilities in perception. All of these are filtered. What survives is what persists long enough to matter. Just like stars, this parallel is not poetic coincidence. It is structural. The universe filters reality through distance and time. Your brain filters reality through processing and memory. Both produce a version of the world that is usable but incomplete, and both hide their work so well that the result feels immediate and true. This is why the universe feels familiar, not because it is simple, but because it operates under the same constraints as your own awareness. You are not an alien observer trying to understand a strange cosmos. You are a local expression of the same rules. This realization reframes the earlier sense of unease. The feeling that something was off was not a warning of deception. It was recognition. Recognition that reality does not arrive all at once, that it must be assembled, and assembly always involves loss. When your brain integrates signals over time, it discards detail. It keeps what is stable and releases what is transient. This is why memory works the way it does. You do not remember every moment. You remember patterns, themes, repetitions, enduring impressions. Your life, as you recall it, is not a record of everything that happened. It is a narrative built from what lasted, and that narrative feels like truth. But it is curated, just like the sky. The events that shaped you most were not necessarily the most frequent. They were the most persistent. The ones that echoed, the ones that left traces strong enough to survive integration. This is why trauma can define identity and why fleeting joys can vanish. not because they were less real, but because they did not endure long enough to be woven into the story. The universe does the same thing at scale. It weaves a story from what persists across distance and time. And you, as a conscious being, do the same thing within yourself. This parallel carries a quiet implication. If you accept that your own experience of reality is reconstructed and delayed, yet still meaningful, then the universe's delayed appearance loses its threat, because you have never required immediacy to find meaning. You have always lived in memory. The present, as you experience it, is already a synthesis of the past, and that synthesis is enough to feel grounded, to act, to care. This is where the tone of the journey begins to soften, not because the questions have been answered, but because they no longer feel hostile. The universe is not withholding truth out of indifference or cruelty. It is simply operating under the same constraints that make your own consciousness possible. Delay is not a bug, it is a feature. Without delay, there would be no integration. Without integration, there would be no stability. Without stability, there would be no meaning. This reframes the idea of living in a museum of light. Museums are not cemeteries. They are places of preservation. They exist to maintain continuity across time. They allow the past to inform the present. Your mind is a museum. Your identity is an exhibit, assembled from moments that no longer exist. And yet, that exhibit moves. It changes. It adapts. It is not static. The universe works the same way. The past arrives. It is integrated. It informs what comes next, and then it becomes part of the archive. This is why the absence of a universal present does not collapse meaning. Meaning does not live in instants. It lives in continuity. Continuity does not require simultaneity. It requires overlap. Enough overlap for patterns to form, of persistence, for structures to stabilize. This is why both the universe and consciousness favor what lasts. Not because duration is morally superior, but because duration is legible. You cannot build understanding from flickers alone. You need threads. This insight brings a subtle calm. The universe is not asking you to see everything. It is asking you to recognize what endures. The sky is full of ancient light because ancient light has had time to reach you. Your mind is full of memory because memory has had time to consolidate. Neither is complete. Both are coherent, and coherence is enough to orient yourself. This also explains why the idea of a final, perfect understanding has always been elusive. You are trying to capture a system that is not designed to be frozen. Neither the universe nor your own mind exists as a static object. They exist as processes. Processes cannot be fully grasped in a single frame. They can only be followed. This is why certainty feels temporary. You feel grounded for a while. Then new information arrives. Your model shifts. Your understanding deepens. This does not mean you were wrong. It means the process continued. The universe is not a thing that can be solved. It is something that unfolds. And you are part of that unfolding. This dissolves the final residue of the observer illusion. You are not standing outside reality, frustrated by delay. You are inside reality, participating in the same delayed integration that defines everything else. This is not alienation. It is alignment. Once you see this, the night sky begins to feel different. Not distant, not deceptive, but familiar. It is doing what you do, holding on to what persists, letting go of what fades, building coherence from fragments. And this familiarity changes the emotional tone of everything. The universe is no longer something you must catch up to. There is no race. There is no present you are missing. There is only a flow in which information moves, is integrated, and becomes part of what follows. This perspective also reframes anxiety, the fear that you are always late, the fear that you never see things as they are. but you have never needed to see things as they are, to live. You have always needed to see things as they remain. What remains is what guides action. What remains is what forms identity. What remains is what shapes meaning. The universe offers you what remains. Your mind does the same. This is not deception. It is cooperation. A cooperation between limitation and survival, between delay and coherence, between incompleteness and understanding. This is why, even after all the unsettling revelations, you do not feel lost. You feel quiet, because the universe is no longer demanding that you understand it all at once. It never did. It is inviting you to exist within it, as it exists within itself, fragmented, delayed, integrated, and somehow still whole enough. As this chapter fades, the journey begins to slow, not because there is nothing left to explore, but because the need to push outward is giving way to something else. A willingness to remain, to sit with what has arrived, to accept that the sky does not need to speak in the present tense to be meaningful. The remaining chapters will not introduce new shocks. They will refine this calm. They will let the universe breathe. They will allow the questions to soften into presence, not a universal present, a local one, yours. And in that quiet locality, the last movement of this story will begin to unfold. As the urgency fades, something unexpected takes its place. Not certainty, not answers. Permission. Permission to stop chasing immediacy. Permission to stop demanding that the universe speak faster. Permission to exist comfortably inside delay. Up to this point, delay has felt like a problem to be solved, a barrier, a distortion. But now, delay begins to feel like a condition, not an obstacle, but a texture of reality itself. And textures are not meant to be eliminated. They are meant to be felt. This is where the story exhales. Because once you accept that delay is not an error, the need to correct it dissolves. You no longer need the universe to show itself all at once. You no longer need light to arrive on time. No longer need the present to be globally shared. What you begin to notice instead is that delay creates space. Space for integration, space for meaning, space for rest. A universe without delay would be overwhelming. Every event would collide with every observer instantly. Nothing would have time to settle. Nothing would persist long enough to be understood. In such a universe, there would be no memory, only immediacy. And immediacy is not clarity, it is noise. The universe you inhabit is not noisy in that way. It is slow. And slowness is not absence, it is rhythm. This is why the night sky does not rush you. The light arrives patiently. Ancient photons drift in, one after another, asking nothing. They do not demand interpretation. They do not insist on relevance. They simply arrive. And arrival, in a delayed universe, is already a gift. This reframes the emotional core of everything you have explored. Earlier, the idea of living in a museum of light felt unsettling, like being surrounded by ghosts. But museums are not haunted places. They are quiet places. They exist so that things do not vanish entirely. They exist so that what once mattered can still be encountered. An encounter does not require simultaneity. It requires presence. Not cosmic presence, local presence. Your presence, this is where the story begins to settle into something almost meditative. The universe is not asking you to reconstruct its current state. It is inviting you to witness what remains. And what remains is not random. It is curated by endurance. Endurance is not glamorous. It is not dramatic, but it is reliable. Stars that shine steadily for billions of years become anchors. Galaxies that hold their structure become landmarks. Patterns that repeat across vast spans of time become guides. These guides are not telling you what is happening right now. They are telling you what has been stable enough to matter. And stability is the quiet language. of a universe that cannot speak in the present tense. This is why the sky feels calming, not because nothing is happening, but because what you see has survived long enough to be seen. Your mind responds to that endurance. It relaxes. It recognizes something it knows how to trust. This trust is not logical. It is embodied. Your nervous system evolved in environments where persistence meant safety. Things that changed too quickly were dangerous. Things that endured were navigable. The night sky is the ultimate expression of endurance, and your body knows it before your mind does. This is why looking up often brings calm, not because the universe is kind, but because it is slow. Slowness allows regulation. It gives the nervous system time to settle, time to integrate, time to rest. This connection between cosmic delay and human calm is not accidental. It is structural. The same physics that stretches light across billions of years also stretches moments inside you into a sense of continuity. Both allow meaning to form. This is where the question of truth quietly shifts again. Truth is no longer about accuracy alone. It becomes about usability. What kind of truth can be lived with? A universe that reveals itself instantly would be impossible to inhabit. There would be no anticipation, no reflection, no integration. Everything would be now, and now would collapse under its own weight. Delay saves you from that. It filters reality into something manageable, not complete, but livable. This is not a concession. It is a design constraint. The universe is not optimized for observation. It is optimized for persistence. And persistence creates the conditions for observers to exist at all, which means that the very thing that once felt like a limitation, the delay of light, is also what makes orientation possible. Without delay, there would be no night sky, as you know it. There would be no layered past to gaze into. There would be no depth, only immediacy. And immediacy is flat. Depth requires time. This is why ancient light feels deep, not because it is informative in the present sense, but because it carries duration. Duration is what gives experiences weight. Your most meaningful memories are not defined by precision. They are defined by how long they echo. The universe speaks the same way. It does not shout. It resonates. This realization changes how silence is interpreted. Earlier, silence felt like absence, like something missing. But silence can also be spacious. It can be the pause that allows something else to settle. The universe is full of these pauses, between signals, between epochs, between arrivals, and these pauses are not empty. They are room for interpretation, room for meaning, room for stillness. This is where the journey begins to feel less like inquiry and more like listening, not listening for answers, but listening for tone, the tone of a universe that does not hurry, a universe that does not demand comprehension, a universe that allows you to arrive late and still belong. This is a subtle shift in posture. You stop leaning forward. You stop trying to see further. You begin to sit, to let what has arrived be enough. This does not mean abandoning curiosity. It means releasing urgency. Curiosity without urgency becomes contemplation, and contemplation is where the universe's quiet generosity becomes visible. It gives you time to integrate what you see, time to feel small without feeling erased, time to exist without explanation. This is why the idea of rest enters the story here. Not rest as inactivity, but rest as alignment. Alignment with a reality that does not move at human speed. Alignment with a cosmos that unfolds on scales far beyond reaction. When you align with that pace, something inside you slows, not intellectually, physiologically. Your breathing deepens, your attention widens. The universe does not rush you because it cannot. Light takes time. Everything takes time. And time here is not pressure. it is permission. This reframes the entire journey. The revelations were never meant to destabilize you. They were meant to recalibrate expectations, to release you from the demand that reality be immediate, complete, and transparent. Those demands were never realistic. They were habits, inherited assumptions, and habits can be unlearned. When they are, something gentler takes their place. Acceptance without resignation, wonder without urgency, presence without simultaneity. This is not a philosophical conclusion. It is a physiological one. Your body knows. When it is allowed to slow down, the sky gives it that signal. Endurance communicates safety. Distance communicates spaciousness. Ancient light communicates continuity. These are not abstract ideas. They are felt. This is why people have always looked to the sky for comfort. Long before telescopes, long before cosmology, they did not know the stars were ancient. They only knew they were steady. And steadiness matters. It grounds you. It reminds you that not everything changes at once, that some things outlast you. Not in a threatening way, in a stabilizing one. The universe does not compete with your fleetingness. It contains it, and containment is restful. This is where the story begins, to prepare for its final movement, not toward answers, but toward quiet. The remaining chapters will not introduce new structures. They will let the existing ones breathe. They will linger in the space that delay creates. They will allow the idea that you do not need to see the universe clearly, to feel at home inside it. Because home is not built from immediacy. It is built from continuity, and continuity is exactly what a delayed universe offers. The light arrives late, but it keeps arriving. And that persistence, that refusal to vanish, is the universe's most gentle gesture. Not a lie, not a trick, an invitation to slow down, to look without urgency, to let what remains be enough. As this chapter fades, nothing resolves, nothing concludes. The story simply settles deeper into its own rhythm. And in that rhythm, there is space to rest. The universe does not need you to keep up. It is not going anywhere. It will continue to send its light, slowly, patiently, long after you stop asking what time it is. And that, perhaps, is the most comforting truth of all. Eventually, even the need to understand begins to soften, not disappear, not be replaced. Just loosen its grip, because there is a difference between curiosity and restlessness. Curiosity opens, restlessness grasps. Much of what drove the earlier questions was not curiosity alone. It was the quiet tension of wanting the universe to settle into something definitive, a final shape, a final explanation. But the universe never promised that. And now, having walked this far, you can begin to feel why. Finality is not compatible with a reality built from delay. Closure requires simultaneity, and simultaneity does not exist here. The universe unfolds as overlapping after images, each one incomplete, each one sufficient. And that sufficiency is easy to miss if you are always searching for what is missing. This chapter is where that search begins to release itself, not because the questions were wrong, but because they have done their work. They have shifted your posture. You no longer approach the universe as a puzzle demanding resolution. You approach it as a field inviting attention. Attention is different from analysis. Analysis breaks things apart. Attention allows things to be present without being finished. The night sky does not resolve. When you look at it, it remains open, and perhaps that openness is not a flaw. Perhaps it is the point. This is where the word mystery can finally be used, without tension. Not mystery as ignorance, not mystery as failure, but mystery as unexhausted depth, something that does not need to be closed in order to be meaningful. The universe is mysterious, not because it hides answers, but because it is larger than any single moment of understanding, and delay preserves that largeness. If everything were immediate, everything would be consumed at once. There would be no remainder, no depth left to return to. Delay ensures that understanding is always partial, and therefore always renewable. This is why the sky does not grow old, even though its light is ancient. Each glance is incomplete, each understanding provisional. You can return again and again, and still find space. This is where rest becomes something other than passivity. Rest becomes trust. Trust that the universe does not need to be fully grasped to be lived with. Trust that meaning does not evaporate in the absence of closure. Trust that not knowing everything is not the same as knowing nothing. This trust is subtle. It does not arrive as certainty. It arrives as a reduction in urgency, a slowing of the internal pace, a willingness to remain with what is available, and what is available is always enough for the moment. This is a difficult shift because the modern impulse is to push through uncertainty, to resolve, to finalize. But the universe you inhabit does not operate that way. It reveals itself through endurance, not disclosure. It becomes familiar through repetition, not explanation. The sky does not explain itself. It persists, and persistence is how it earns trust. This is why, after all the complexity, the final feeling is not confusion. It is calm, not the calm of certainty, but the calm of orientation. You know where you are, even if you do not know everything. You are inside a delayed universe that integrates slowly. So are you. This symmetry matters because it means you are not misaligned with reality. You are shaped by it. Your pace matches its pace more closely than you realize. You sleep, you wake, you remember, you forget. The universe does the same, not metaphorically. Structurally, it accumulates, it dissipates, it carries forward what lasts. This is why the idea of falling behind was always misplaced. There is nothing to catch up to. There is no universal present waiting for you. There is only participation from where you are. And participation does not require speed. It requires presence, local presence, your presence. This is where the story's tone becomes almost still, not empty. Still, like a lake. After wind has passed, the reflections are not perfect, but they are sufficient. You can see enough to know where you stand. This is the quiet gift of a delayed universe. It never overwhelms you with everything at once. It parcels reality out. Over time, it gives you space to integrate. This is why the universe feels ancient but not oppressive. It has been here a long time, and it will continue long after you. But it does not rush you through your moment within it. Your moment is small, yes, but it is not insignificant. A node in a vast causal web. What you do will travel slowly, quietly. Eventually, this is not poetic comfort. It is physical fact. Your actions will become residue. They will integrate into someone else's sky. They will arrive as ancient light to a future observer, not as you experienced them, but as what endured. This is not loss. It is continuity. You do not need to be present everywhere to matter. You only need to be present where you are. This insight dissolves one last layer of anxiety, the fear that meaning depends on visibility, on being seen, on being synchronized. It does not. Meaning depends on participation, and participation is always local. You act here. The universe responds here. The rest unfolds in its own time. This is enough. This chapter does not conclude with a revelation. It concludes with a pause that feels earned. The questions that once felt sharp now feel rounded. They no longer demand answers. They invite reflection. This is where the story begins to taper, not because it has finished speaking, but because it has slowed to the pace it always had, the pace of light, the pace of integration, the pace of a universe that never needed to hurry to be meaningful. As the remaining chapters approach, nothing new will be introduced. Only what is already here will be allowed to settle fully. The universe has said what it can say through what remains. Now, the task is simply to stay with it, to let the quiet do its work, to allow understanding to become orientation, and orientation to become rest. There is no final answer waiting. There is only this moment, local, delayed, sufficient, and for the first time, that feels like enough. There is a moment when even rest becomes something you stop reaching for, not because you are restless again, but because rest has quietly arrived without asking permission. This is the strange endpoint of a long intellectual journey. You did not solve the universe. You did not arrive at a final explanation. Instead, something else happened. The need to resolve faded, and in its place, a quieter stance took hold, a willingness to remain, without tightening around uncertainty. This chapter lives in that space, not as a conclusion, but as a settling. Because what you have discovered is not a fact about the universe. It is a relationship with it. The universe is delayed, fragmented, never fully present to itself. And so are you. This is not coincidence. It is correspondence. For a long time, human understanding treated delay as a problem to be overcome. Faster signals, sharper images, more immediate data. Progress was measured by how quickly reality could be captured. But somewhere along the way, it became clear that speed does not necessarily bring closeness. You can see more and feel less. You can know more and understand less. Immediacy overwhelms before it clarifies. The universe, by its very structure, refuses that pace. It enforces delay at every scale, and in doing so, it protects coherence. This is the deeper meaning of the speed of light, not as a limit to be beaten, but as a rhythm to be respected. Light moves at a pace that allows structure to persist. If information traveled infinitely fast, everything would collapse into simultaneity. Cause and effect would blur. Meaning would dissolve. The universe would not be navigable. Delay is what gives reality its depth, and depth is what allows orientation. This is why the sky never feels aggressive, even when it shows violence. Explosions, collisions, collapse. It does so slowly. Enough time passes for the mind to absorb it. Enough distance exists for fear to soften into awe. The universe does not assault perception. It approaches. This approachability is what makes contemplation possible, which brings us to a subtle realization. The universe is not indifferent to understanding, but it is not optimized for explanation either. It is optimized for continuity, and continuity favors patience. This patience is not passive, it is structural. Every process unfolds on its own scale. Stars take millions of years to evolve. Galaxies take billions. Nothing important happens instantly, and nothing essential requires urgency. Urgency is a local phenomenon, a product of short lifespans, inside long processes. To see this, urgency begins to loosen, not disappear, but soften. You still care, you still act, but you stop demanding that the universe keep pace with your questions. This is where something unexpected emerges. Gratitude, not the dramatic kind, not directed at anything in particular, just a quiet recognition that you are not required to hold everything at once, that you are allowed to receive reality gradually. That understanding is permitted to be incomplete. This is a gift rarely acknowledged. Most systems, especially human-made ones, punish incompleteness. They demand resolution. They demand certainty. The universe does not. It allows partial views without penalty. It allows ignorance without collapse. It allows orientation without totality. This generosity is not intentional. It is a byproduct of scale, but it is real. and it changes how existence feels. Once you notice it, the night sky no longer asks to be interpreted. It allows itself to be experienced. This shift is subtle, but profound. You stop asking what it means. You let it mean what it can. This does not reduce understanding. It deepens it. Because meaning that is forced becomes brittle. Meaning that emerges from endurance becomes resilient. This is why ancient light still speaks. Not loudly, but steadily. It does not need to be new, to be relevant. It needs only to have lasted. This endurance mirrors another quiet truth. Your own life is made of moments that lasted. You do not remember everything that happened. You remember what stayed, what echoed, what shaped you over time. Those moments were not always the most intense. They were the most persistent. The universe works the same way. It is remembered through what endures. And endurance is not dramatic. It is faithful. This reframes the idea of legacy. Legacy is not about visibility. It is about persistence. What lasts does not need to announce itself. It simply remains. This is why the fear of being forgotten feels less sharp inside a delayed universe. Everything fades eventually. But fading is not erasure. It is integration. What fades becomes part of the background that allows new things to stand out. The universe is not a ledger tracking importance. It is a field where persistence accumulates. This is where the idea of meaning finally relaxes. Meaning is not assigned. It is not guaranteed. It is accumulated slowly through repetition, through endurance, through participation. You do not need to understand the whole to contribute to it. You only need to persist long enough to leave a trace. And you will. Everything does. This realization carries a quiet comfort, not because it removes uncertainty, but because it removes pressure. You are not required to make sense of everything. You are not required to be synchronized. You are not required to see clearly. You are required only to exist locally and allow time to do its work. This is where the story's energy drops to its lowest point, not as emptiness, but as stillness, the kind of stillness that comes after movement has found its rhythm. You are no longer moving toward insight. You are resting within it. And insight, when rested in, becomes wisdom. Wisdom does not rush. It does not conclude. It lingers. This is why this chapter does not feel like progress. It feels like arrival, not at an answer, but at a pace, the pace of a universe that integrates slowly, the pace of a mind that no longer resists that slowness. This is where the metaphor of the museum finally dissolves. Museums preserve because time would otherwise erase. But the universe does not preserve intentionally. It simply allows things to persist according to their nature. What remains is not curated. It is selected by endurance. And endurance is not judgment. It is physics. This is where the universe stops feeling like a collection of ghosts and starts feeling like a continuum. The past is not gone. It is layered. The future is not absent. It is forming. You stand inside the overlap, not privileged, not excluded, simply positioned. This position is not stable. It shifts, but it shifts slowly enough to be lived in. This is the final emotional turn. Before the story closes, not awe, not fear, but belonging. Not belonging as ownership, belonging as participation. You belong to a universe that does not hurry, that does not resolve, that does not collapse into final answers. And because of that, you are allowed to be unfinished. The remaining chapters will not add weight. They will release it. They will let the ideas fade into the background where they can continue working without attention. Because the deepest shifts do not announce themselves. They settle quietly. over time, like light traveling through space, not rushing, not stopping, simply continuing. And in that continuation, everything that needs to arrive eventually does. Not all at once, not on demand, but enough, always enough. There is a final illusion that dissolves, only when everything else has quieted, the illusion that the universe is something you are meant to finish understanding. For a long time, that belief sat quietly beneath every question, not spoken, not challenged, just assumed. That, if you kept going, looking farther, thinking deeper, refining models, there would eventually be a moment when the picture locked into place, a moment of completion. But here, at the edge of all this slowing, that moment never arrives. And instead of frustration, what appears is relief, because completion was never compatible with the kind of universe you inhabit. A universe built from delay cannot be concluded. A universe without simultaneity cannot be finalized. A universe that never presents itself all at once cannot be captured in total. This is not a failure of effort. It is a property of reality. And once you stop expecting completion, a subtle freedom emerges. You are no longer late. You are no longer behind. You are no longer missing something essential. You are exactly where participation happens. This chapter is about letting go of the last demand placed on the cosmos, the demand that it eventually resolve into something finished. The universe does not resolve. It continues, and continuation does not ask to be summarized. It asks to be inhabited. This is where the idea of truth undergoes its final transformation. Truth is no longer a destination. It is a direction, a way of moving with what persists, a way of orienting within change, without demanding its end. Truth becomes something you align with, not something you possess. This alignment is not static, it adjusts. Just as the universe adjusts, the light that arrives tomorrow will not complete the picture. It will modify it, and modification is not loss. It is vitality. This is why the universe has remained intelligible for as long as it has. Not because it is simple, but because it allows understanding to remain provisional. Provisional understanding is resilient. It bends without breaking. It absorbs new information without collapsing. Final understanding would be brittle. One contradiction would shatter it. The universe never offers that kind of certainty, and in doing so, it protects meaning. This is the quiet intelligence of a reality built on delay. It never gives you everything, so nothing you know can be taken away all at once. This is why knowledge evolves instead of ending, why curiosity never exhausts itself, why the sky never becomes boring. Every answer opens space rather than closing it, and that space is where existence continues. This reframes the role of the observer. One last time, you are not here to finish the universe. You are here to carry it forward, not consciously, not deliberately. Simply by existing, your presence becomes part of the universe's delay. Your actions will be seen later. Your moment will be integrated. Your trace will persist or fade, according to the same rules that govern everything else. This is not a burden. It is symmetry. The universe does not privilege you with immediacy. It also does not exclude you from continuity. You are treated exactly as everything else is treated. What you do will endure only if it lasts. And if it does not, it will dissolve without judgment. This is not nihilism. It is neutrality. And neutrality is gentler than expectation. Expectation demands performance. Neutrality allows being. This is where the universe's silence reveals its final quality. It is not withholding. It is non-demanding. It does not require you to understand it. It does not require you to interpret it correctly. It does not require you to reach the right conclusion. It simply unfolds, and you are allowed to unfold with it. This permission is subtle. It is easy to miss, because it does not announce itself, but once noticed, It changes the emotional weight of everything. You no longer feel measured against cosmic time. You no longer feel evaluated by scale. You no longer feel diminished by vastness. Vastness becomes context, not competition. The universe is large, so that no single moment has to carry everything. Your moment does not need to justify itself. It only needs to exist. This is where the earlier anxiety about relevance finally dissolves. You do not need to be visible everywhere. You do not need to be synchronized. You do not need to be remembered universally. Existence does not demand cosmic acknowledgement. It only demands local causality, and that is already satisfied. This is why the idea of being seen loses its urgency. Everything is seen, eventually, not by everyone, not at once, but by the universe itself, as it integrates what remains. This integration is not conscious, but it is consistent, and consistency is enough. This is where the metaphor of light completes its journey. Light does not rush to arrive. It does not speed up because someone is waiting. It moves at the pace the universe allows, and that pace is sufficient, not optimal, not efficient, sufficient. Your life follows the same rule. You move at a pace defined by constraints, biological, psychological, temporal. You cannot speed through existence without losing coherence. You cannot arrive at meaning faster than integration allows. This is not a limitation, it is protection. Which brings us to the quiet realization at the heart of this chapter. The universe is not late, it is on time. For the kind of reality it is, the feeling of lateness was always a mismatch between expectation and structure. Once expectation softens, lateness disappears. You stop asking, why hasn't it arrived yet? And start noticing it is arriving continuously. Arrival is not a moment. It is a process. This dissolves the final urgency. There is nothing left to catch up to. No final truth approaching. No ultimate reveal waiting just beyond the horizon. There is only continuation. And continuation does not end. It flows. This is why the sky never feels finished, because it is not meant to. It is meant to remain open, an open system, an open story, an open field of integration. This openness is not a lack, it is a condition for participation. And participation does not require answers. It requires presence, local presence, your presence. This chapter does not close with insight. It closes with release. The release of the final demand that the universe be something other than what it is. A reality that speaks slowly, that integrates patiently, that allows meaning to form without ever sealing it shut. This release does not end curiosity. It purifies it. Curiosity becomes lighter when it is no longer burdened with completion. It becomes attention, and attention is enough. As this chapter fades, nothing resolves. Nothing completes. Something simpler happens. The universe is allowed to remain unfinished, and so are you. This is not a failure. It is fidelity to the way reality actually unfolds. There is one chapter left, not to conclude, not to summarize, but to gently let go, to allow the story to dissolve into the same quiet from which it emerged. The final movement does not add meaning, it allows meaning to rest, and rest here is not the absence of thought, it is the absence of pressure. That is what remains. When the universe no longer needs to explain itself, and when you no longer need it to, eventually, even the story lets go of itself. Not with a conclusion, not with a statement, not with an answer that settles everything into place. It lets go the same way light does, by continuing, because the universe never needed an ending to be complete in the only way that matters. It needed continuity, and continuity does not announce itself. It does not close doors. It does not draw lines. It simply remains in motion, quietly integrating what arrives. This final chapter does not exist to explain anything new. Everything that could be said has already passed through you, not as facts, but as shifts in posture. You are no longer trying to catch the universe in the act. You are no longer waiting for it to speak in the present tense. You are no longer asking it to arrive faster. You are here, inside the delay, and that is enough. The night sky has not changed. The stars are still ancient. The light is still late. The distances are still immeasurable. And yet, the way you are standing beneath them is different. There is no longer a sense of betrayal in the fact that what you see belongs to another time. There is no longer a feeling that something essential is being withheld, because withholding implies intention. The universe has none. It simply unfolds at a pace that makes continuity possible. And continuity, now, is no longer something you are trying to understand. It is something you are willing to inhabit. This is where the metaphor of deception finally dissolves. Light was never lying. It was never telling the truth either. It was doing what it always does, carrying what could survive the journey. And you, like everything else, are part of that journey. You are not outside the Museum of Light. You are one of its future exhibits, not in a literal sense, but structurally. What you do will leave traces. Those traces will travel. They will be delayed, filtered, integrated. They will arrive somewhere else, as something that once happened. And that is not erasure. That is participation. The universe does not ask you to be present forever. It asks you to be present now, locally, without needing the rest of existence to synchronize around you. There is no cosmic clock waiting for you to catch up. There is no master timeline that you are behind on. There is only this region of causality where your actions matter and your attention can rest. This is what it means to belong to a delayed universe, not to see everything, not to understand everything, but to exist inside a flow that does not require urgency. The universe is not in a hurry because it does not need to arrive anywhere. It is already here, everywhere it can be. The feeling that something was missing came from expecting immediacy. Once that expectation loosens, nothing feels absent anymore. The stars are distant, but they are steady. The past is dominant, but it is generous. The future is hidden, but it is forming. And you stand between these layers without needing to resolve them. This is not resignation. It is alignment. Alignment with a reality that does not collapse into answers, but stretches into time. And stretching is not strain. It is space. Space for thought, space for breath, space for silence. Silence, now, no longer feels empty. It feels wide. Earlier, silence felt like something lost, information that never arrived, events that could not be seen. Now, silence feels like permission. Permission for the universe to remain larger than explanation. Permission for meaning to remain unfinished. Permission for you to stop holding everything together. The universe does not need you to understand it. It never did. Understanding was something you wanted, not something it required. And wanting was not wrong. It brought you here. But now, the wanting can rest. Because rest does not mean indifference. It means trust. Trust that continuity is enough. Trust that participation does not require comprehension. Trust that being part of a process is meaningful, even when the process has no final shape. This trust is quiet. It does not argue. It does not insist. It simply allows the sky to be what it has always been, a slow arrival of what remains. You can still look up and wonder. Wonder does not disappear, but it changes character. It becomes less sharp, less demanding. It no longer asks, "What is really happening right now?" End quote. It asks, "What has endured long enough to meet me here and to cancer?" And that question carries no urgency, only presence. The universe meets you where it can. You meet it where you are. That overlap that thin slice of shared causality, is not a failure of access. It is the only place where meaning ever existed. Meaning was never global. It was never universal. It was always local, always contingent, always unfolding. The mistake was thinking it needed to be more than that. That's why, after everything, nothing feels unresolved. Not because questions disappeared, but because they no longer feel like gaps. They feel like openness. And openness is not something to fill. It is something to rest inside. The sky does not need to explain itself tonight. It has already done what it does best. It has arrived slowly, patiently, carrying just enough to orient you, not to instruct you, not to conclude anything, just to be there. And you do not need to hold on to it. You do not need to extract meaning. You can let it pass through you, the way light passes through space, leaving a trace, integrating quietly, becoming part of what follows. This is not the end of a story. It is the point where the story no longer needs to be told. The universe continues without narration, and you are free to continue with it, not as an observer chasing truth, but as a presence moving within delay. Nothing closes here. Nothing resolves. The night sky remains open. So do you. Close your eyes now. The light is still traveling. The universe is still integrating. And somewhere far beyond urgency, everything that needs to continue already is.